When people talk about manga, you always hear the same names: One Piece, Fullmetal Alchemist, Attack on Titan. But one name that I never hear is USOGUI, and I understand why. The sheer density of the story, the complex gambles, the character foreshadowing, and the way that every detail matters in the end makes it one of the most complex and daunting reads out there. But if you just give it a chance and sit down with it like I did, you'll probably come to the same conclusion as me. USOGUI isn't just a great manga, it might be the best piece of fiction ever made. Over the past year, I've read all 539 chapters 3 times, and even written a 400-page script. It's that complex, trying to break it down into a more digestible format for the casual reader. In this series, I'm gonna walk you guys through it, breaking down the fights, explaining the gambles, and hopefully showing you why USOGUI has cemented itself as my favorite manga of all time. I'm very excited to take you all on this journey with me. And if you want to support videos like this that take 200-300 hours to just edit, feel free to check out my Patreon in the description. And if not, sit tight, grab a snack, and enjoy. We first encounter our protagonist spinning slots in a casino. As he stands up to leave, a man with buzzed hair nearby states that he actually won since he rolled double sevens. The gambler eats a Japanese apricot and states that he barely spent any money to pull off this massive win. As the buzzed hair man responds, astounded, a gang of hooligans show up. They address the buzzed hair man as Kaji, and they are apparently there to claim his life. The gambler turns around and punches Kaji, to the surprise of the onlookers, scolding him for getting involved in loan sharking. He makes up a story about Kaji showing up to beg for money, knowing he was a loan shark, and then came back with a lawyer. The gambler claims that this put his boss in prison and caused his loan office to lose all of its money. Since he no longer has a job, the gambler turns to the thugs and asks, since they're in the same line of work, if they'll hire him. Scared of being punished by the law, the loan sharks buy the story and run away. After Kaji thanks him for scaring off the loan sharks, we learn, based on the gambler's guesses, that Kaji is in financial hell. He first borrowed money for some leisurely fun, spent it all, and then pursued shadier methods in order to gamble back the money he had already lost. Now, he claims, he's facing a debt of only 2 million yen. The gambler fires back that even 2 million yen isn't a returnable value for someone borrowing money in the first place. He states that one should only gamble to win, and as soon as Kaji hopped on the slots, he established himself as a loser. Kaji claims he's not actually a gambler, to which the other man replies he's a bona fide gambler, but luck is now on his side. The man who won the slots, who we learn is named Baku Madarame, promises to get Kaji's money back. With this, they head to the casino, where Baku watches the games carefully. At some point, he stands up, obviously drunk, and heads over to the roulette table. The game is simple. Guess where the ball is going to land. Baku's bet? Every single number except for 00. With a 37 out of 38 or 97% chance to win, he obviously does. But since he bet so much, he ended up spending 37,000 yen to win back 36,000. Next, he puts down bets on every number except 00 and the 10 that he just landed on. His premise is simple. Every round, take his bet off of the number it just landed on, therefore slowly increasing his profits. This is also dependent on the assumption that the ball will never land on the same number twice in a row. Baku continues to raise the bet until he's won 4 times in a row, at which point the dealer smirks to himself. The ball then lands on 10, a number that Baku's already won, meaning he's removed his bet and loses. But Baku simply smiles to himself. Outwardly, he presents himself as a gambling addict, shuffling through his pockets, claiming he's still got money and will just start the process over again, now wagering on all numbers except 10. It can't happen a third time, he says. The dealer thinks to himself that it's his job to rob suckers that have such trust in their luck, stating he'll end Baku this round. Baku has now pulled out another apricot, and as he takes a bite, Kaji notices something. Baku speaks directly to the dealer now, asking him if he thinks it's possible for it to land on 10 for the 3rd time. The dealer, acting oblivious, says it's incredibly unlikely. Baku's retort is that the dealer's face is peaceful, like a Buddha, but his personality is wicked. He asks the dealer if he truly thinks Baku believes in some dumb superstition, and tells the dealer that he's instead been looking for someone who can precisely aim the ball. Basically, he's been looking for a dealer that can rig the game's outcome to whatever he wants. We now get a flashback. While sitting at the bar, Baku told Kaji that whenever he pulled out his apricot, he needed to bet on whatever space Baku had left empty. Back to the present, the dealer has already launched the ball, and we now know he's rigged the game for it to end on 10 once more. In roulette, once the ball has been launched by the dealer, you still have time to bet before the ball loses speed and falls into a number slot. So, since Baku had been blindly placing bets before the ball had even launched, Kaji now has time to wager on 10. His wager is 90,000 chips, the maximum bet. The dealer now realizes he's been conned and completely manipulated by Baku. Everything he's done, from appearing drunk and pretending to gamble blindly, has all been to con the dealer. The ball lands in 10, and the dealer states that Baku has eaten him. Baku stands up to leave, and Kaji calls his name, asking him to wait up. The dealer freezes. He knows the name Baku, and has heard legend of a gambler within the mythical club Kakaro, where they perform the darkest gambles, of a man who survived countless near-death games. His name was Baku Madarame, and his alias, the Lie Eater. As the dealer remembers this, Baku calls out for him, stating that he is a liar. Kaji decides to use his share of the roulette gamble, which Baku kindly shared, to pay off his loans. Baku laughs at him, stating he doesn't have to pay that money back, and instead should study first and pay his debts tomorrow. This leads Kaji to research the laws and end up at a law office, where the lawyer states he's eligible for bankruptcy. By utilizing this redrawn calculation of his debt, he now owes 700 to 800,000 of his original 1.5 million yen. With this, he's able to pay off the loans he took out later to repay his original one, and all he has to repay now is that original one. Baku explains that the company he originally borrowed from has a 1 next to its name in the newspaper. This means that the business has only existed for 1 year, and any loan business who's still new is shady. They often squeeze money from their customers illegally and then disappear, registering under a new name and starting again. Baku starts to say that the only concern is who backs these loan sharks, and that it could be the Yakuza. But Kaji has already disappeared to the loan company to handle it himself. We then see the phone attendant at Nitro Loan get a call. The man on the other end states that his horse racing ticket with the numbers 2341, earning him 10 million yen. The desk attendant, obviously angered, states that it's a wrong number, and he's apparently gotten this same call multiple times today. Next to the desk, we see Kaji discussing the legality of his loans with another employee. The employee is obviously not happy, stating that Kaji won't be leaving anytime soon. Kaji attempts to fight back, but he gets clocked, and a mysterious voice comes from the corner. Baku appears, claiming he came to borrow money. The loan sharks ask who he is, and Baku claims that should be his line. He claims he never allowed any loan sharks to do business in this neighborhood, and his group won't be happy. This is done to make the loan sharks assume that he's a Yakuza, and they claim they already have a group backing them, so another Yakuza family. Baku tells them to call that group over, but states he's simply come to borrow money. 3 million yen to be exact. This stuns the loan sharks, since they're used to loaning out 100,000 yen at a time. Baku offers collateral though, a bunch of trash from his pocket, and then asks for them to give Kaji some money for the suffering they caused him. The loan shark, fuming, says it sounds like Baku is fucking with him, which he is. Kaji notices that this attitude that Baku is playing up makes him seem like a cocky Yakuza. By doing this, he's gambling that the loan sharks actually don't have a Yakuza family backing them up. While Kaji's thinking this, the phone attendee walks over. He looks down at the trash from Baku's pocket and notices a betting ticket in the papers. On it are the numbers 234, the winning numbers that the man kept calling about earlier. With a smile on his face, this man walks over to get a key, saying he'll happily throw in a 1 million yen bonus, since he secretly knows he'll make 10 million yen off the winning ticket. Baku and Kaji then go to leave when Baku states that if the place is still open tomorrow, he'll be coming back. Kaji's dumbfounded, saying he has no idea what just happened. Baku explains that since the loan office was listed on a site of suspicious offices, that meant they had attracted the attention of the cops, and a Yakuza-backed company would be much more professional. We now see the two loan sharks walking in to cash their ticket, laughing to themselves at Baku's stupidity for giving it up. They hand it to the clerk, who tells them it's actually not a winning ticket. We learn that the ticket was actually placed there purposefully by Baku, and the one who kept calling the loan office about the winning ticket was Baku himself. The next day, the loan office was shut down. Baku heads back to Kaji's place, where he looks around and notices a fake bill. Kaji then explains how he had rented a porn video, the big titty scheme, and since he forgot about it, there's likely late fees. Baku suggests they go return it together, and at the video store, the employee states that there's 12,000 yen in late fees accumulated. Kaji is embarrassed, but Baku asks to speak with the manager. Once they sit down with the manager, Baku claims the store is committing a major felony, and that they're selling the customers' personal information. The division head appears at this point, claiming that these are major accusations, and that there better be proof. Baku explains, Kaji became a member of the store the day he moved into a new apartment, a month ago. Within the month, he's already being bombarded by scam mail, and this is the only store Kaji's given his information to. Even with this, Baku claims they don't want to press charges, and instead just want the late fees dropped. The store manager claims they could do that for them, but the division head just laughs. He claims the evidence is flimsy at best, and that they're simply trying to avoid the late fee. He asks them to leave and threatens to call the cops. Baku doubles down, gambling 1 million yen that Kaji's information was sold from this store. At this point, the division head notices the store manager sweating and thinks to himself, please tell me you haven't secretly been selling information. The division head is worried about being arrested, but since their evidence is lackluster, he doubles down, telling the store manager to call the police. As he looks down at the table though, the division head notices the secret that connects the false bills to the store's membership application. When signing up for the membership, there was an earthquake, and that caused Kaji to accidentally draw a squiggle at the end of his address. Now, on the spam mail, there's an N at the end of the address, which is the letter that the squiggle resembles. Due to this, there exists a special address with the N at the end that only exists in the records of this store. Baku corners the division head, who claims he'll do anything to avoid them pressing charges. Because of this, he and Kaji receive 2 million yen and free movie rentals forever. Kaji starts to realize Baku is an incredible gambler, and as they play rock, paper, scissors to watch the porn video first, Kaji wins. Baku steps out onto the balcony, mumbling to himself that he needs more money. Lots more. We see a man being chased through side streets. He has a bag of money and attempts to use that to bargain, saying he'll give the money back. That doesn't work, however, and he's promptly killed. We now see an old man named Kyutaro, the owner of an abandoned building. He's playing poker against Kaji and USOGUI, and they're winning. Side note, USOGUI is lie eater in Japanese. That's Baku's nickname. That's what I will be referring to him as from this point on. Kaji starts getting bored, which Kyutaro notices and raises the ante to 10 million yen. But he's not betting on poker. Kyutaro tells them that if they can carry the money out of the abandoned building, he'll let them keep it. Kaji is itching for the money, but USOGUI states that the old man better add some extra zeros, since the building reeks of blood, and Kyutaro smells like a murderer. Behind him appears a massive man in a mask, and Kyutaro explains. Him and the massive man will do anything they can to prevent Kaji and USOGUI from escaping. But since this means the two will be betting their lives, Kyutaro agrees to raise the bet. He brings up an organization called Kakuro. Kaji looks over to USOGUI and is stunned. USOGUI, normally emanating an air of cockiness, is seething with anger and determination. A Kakuro member then appears, introducing himself as Hikoichi Yako, Kakuro's number 2 referee. He claims he will preside over this escape the abandoned building gamble. USOGUI simply smiles. Yako notices him, thinking he's an unusual face, meaning he either knows USOGUI or is confused by his emotions. Kaji, completely lost, has no clue what Kakuro even is, so Yako explains. Kakuro is an organization that serves as a referee for gambles, and they take the burden of collecting any debts owed, even human lives. Kyutaro says that he called Yako in to assist in deciding the terms of this gamble, but USOGUI interrupts. He discards the previously mentioned 10 million and instead asks Kyutaro if he'll bet his Kakuro membership. membership. Kyutaro laughs, thinking to himself that his membership is worth much more than the 10 million. He asks Yako to decide a fair wager, who reiterates what Usogi said, the membership. This means that Yako has judged Usogi's worth to be as much or more than the membership. Kyutaro is doubtful and questions Yako's judgment, who fires back with, "What an odd question. The judgment of Kakuro is final." Usogi starts pressing Kyutaro, asking him if he's scared, saying the time to quit is now before he's eaten by Usogi. Kyutaro laughs, stating that his chances to lose are 1 in 10,000. Yako then confirms the terms of the gamble. The game is for Usogi and Kaji to leave the building. If Kyutaro prevents that, they lose. The game will begin 1 minute after the two leave the room. They exit on the 5th floor and quickly realize the power is out. Usogi and Kaji head over to the stairs, and Usogi decides they should go up, since the smell of death is apparently too strong downstairs. We see that's the right choice, as Kyutaro has booby traps on the stairs down to the 4th floor. They end up on the roof, and Kaji still assumes this is just a game, with no real threat to them. A man then appears on the roof behind them with a gun, and Kyutaro is shivering with excitement in his office, showing that he's actually a psychopath and does these gambles for his sick enjoyment, watching his opponents slowly die and suffer. The man on the roof is a different one from the masked man behind Kyutaro, and he states the rules never specified he couldn't have multiple people chase Usogi and Kaji. At this point, Yako speaks up, stating there is too much of a handicap. Kyutaro claims the game has already started, and he can't interfere even if he's using multiple hunters. But Yako simply states he meant the handicap was too weighted towards Usogi and Kaji, stating you will without question lose to the Lie Eater. We now can see Yako's thoughts. He considers Kyutaro, who believes that since Usogi is unarmed, he's going to lose, foolish. Yako thinks that the act of living is just a continuation of victories during your life, even going so far as to believe everything is a gamble. At this point, Usogi is hidden above the man on the roof, but his plan is quickly seen through. The armed man tells Usogi to show himself, but Usogi asks to make a deal. He offers the armed man the 10 million, but we see that the armed man is actually doing this for the thrill, the fun of hunting humans. But the armed guard decides to pretend he wants the money, telling Usogi to stand up and that he won't shoot while he actually backs up to get a better angle. Usogi stands up, acting dumbfounded that the man lied, but as he continues to back up, his ankles are suddenly grabbed. He's dragged backwards with a pole in between his legs, crushing his manhood. Usogi had preemptively told Kaji to stand down on the ledge at the side of the building, and had planned for this entire scenario. "You, sir, are a liar," Usogi remarks. He steals the man's gun, shoots right in front of his face as a threat, and in the office, Yako smirks, remarking that the pawn has won against the rook. Kaji is terrified, realizing this is actually a gamble with their lives on the line. Usogi, meanwhile, loots the now unconscious killer, finding a knife, night vision goggles, and caltrops. At this point, Kaji starts to become delusional since he's being faced with a life or death scenario. It's described as the level of mental stress he could take reaching its limit. He takes the gun from Usogi, looking over the edge of the building, and comes up with a plan to shoot a Yakuza-looking car so that they'll get mad and run up to save them. Usogi attempts to stop him, but Kaji pulls the trigger anyway. The men in the car spot Kaji, start running toward the building, and then a group of suited men suddenly grab the Yakuza. A man in sunglasses wags his finger up at the two on the roof, and Usogi explains that the suited men are Kakuro, and they won't allow outsiders to interfere with the gamble. Usogi explains that Kakuro has power equivalent to a nation, but it doesn't reach Kaji, who's fully lost it. To snap him back into reality, Usogi shoots him, grazes his arm. This not only grounds Kaji, but Usogi claims it's also a plan for later, in order for him to eat Kyutaro all too easily. Kaji is surprised that Usogi would waste a precious bullet in order to save him, since Kaji sees himself as purely baggage in Usogi's eyes. We get some foreshadowing where we're told Kaji wouldn't find out why until later. The next hunters are a group of 3 dressed similarly to the first. Speaking of the first, he wakes up on the roof, fully naked, to another hunter chastising him for losing his gun to Usogi. The new hunter threatens the naked one's life, and the naked one screams that the gun Usogi had fired next to his head affected his hearing, so he can't understand what the new hunter is saying. The new hunter continues to threaten him though, causing the naked hunter to ramble, saying that the other 3 hunters have SMGs, so they shouldn't be worried. The new hunter asks the naked one if he told anything to Usogi, which he didn't. But the naked hunter thinks to himself that if Usogi and Kaji figure out the traps, they'll assume he snitched. So instead, he says that he told them about the traps. The new hunter then acts confused, saying the only traps should be the steel wires on the staircases. At this point, the naked hunter can hear again, since the ringing in his ears is stopped, and realizes the voice of the new hunter is unfamiliar. He turns around, and the new hunter is revealed to be Usogi in disguise, wearing the naked hunter's outfit. Usogi then knocks him out, and we learn that he shot next to the naked hunter's ear in order to make him less wary of Usogi's voice being unfamiliar while he was disguised. We now see the office, where Yako recommends Kyutaro to send him out quickly. Kyutaro retorts, saying this one must be saved for the end, calling the original man we saw standing behind him the main dish, who only serves the flavor of pain. Meanwhile, Usogi was able to disable the traps on the 6th and 7th floors, and the lights have now been turned back on. Usogi shares that this is because the new hunters know that they've acquired night vision goggles from the hunter on the roof, so keeping it dark would be pointless. Usogi and Kaji now know what they're facing due to the trick played on the naked hunter. 3 new hunters, Kyutaro, and the mysterious main dish standing behind him. Usogi explains that Kyutaro is the worst kind of evil, someone that plans to slowly torture them to draw out his pleasure to the maximum. This means he's giving into his greed rather than going for the win, and Usogi claims that this makes the old man simple bait. Kaji notices that Usogi is even scarier than Kyutaro, since he also looks like he's enjoying himself. The 3 new hunters finally arrive on the same floor, with 2 of them approaching our duo and 1 waiting downstairs. The 2 move forward and step on caltrops that Usogi set up. If you don't know what these are, they're basically little spiked metal things. We see a map of the floor, with the 2 hunters closing in on Usogi and Kaji. Usogi asks Kaji for the gun, and Kaji manages to drop it, sending it flying across the floor down the hallway. Now, it's important we look at the floor's layout. Usogi and Kaji run for it, with the 2 hunters going for a pincer attack, since all the doors are locked and the 2 are trapped in a dead end. The one on the left notices the wire traps are still up, so the 2 didn't go this way. He says it's a hassle, but he'll take the traps down slowly and move forward. The hunter in the right hallway laughs to himself, finding the gun Kaji dropped, stating that the prey has no brains at all for leaving their weapon behind. Over the communications device all the hunters are wearing, Kyutaro hears this and smiles to himself, thinking it's over, but notices Yako's eyes. He knows this gamble isn't finished quite yet. The hunter in the right hallway sprints forward, spotting Usogi farther down, who states that they let their guard down after noticing the dropped gun. Kyutaro shouts over the earpiece that the gun may have been tampered with, and to not shoot with the one Usogi had dropped, instead instructing the hunter to use his own gun to take out Usogi's legs. A scream then echoes through the night, and Kyutaro's eyes roll back in his head. The left hallway hunter finally has the traps disabled and catches up. Nobody is in the hall, but he spots bloody marks on the floor. They lead to Kaji, who's covered in blood on all 4s. He gloats over Kaji's body, and a voice appears behind the hunter. But it's not his teammate. It's Usogi, pointing a gun at his head. He speaks into the hunter's earpiece, telling Kyutaro to up his game, since he's a pro. We now learn that the first hunter fell for Usogi's trick. He disabled the wire traps at the beginning of the hallway, making the hunter assume they had all been disabled. By seeing the gun discarded and then Usogi standing in the open, he dropped his guard, sprinting towards Usogi and losing a leg to the still active wire traps down the hall. The blood Kaji is covered in was taken from the legless guard, and Usogi had used this opportunity to circle back around behind the second guard. The second guard is dumbfounded, pondering what kind of world Usogi has possibly been living in to come up with such schemes on the spot. Back in the office, Kyutaro inquires with Yako about who Usogi truly is. Yako shares that this man is called Usogi, the Lie Eater. At the mention of his name, Kyutaro goes pale. We learn that at the age of 15, Usogi took down Kokoro in the blink of an eye, and that he's known as the strongest gambler. Kyutaro realizes that if he beats Usogi here, he'll be crowned the best gambler, and excitedly radios into the remaining guards, demanding they kill Usogi as soon as possible. He also pulls out his trump card, calling the man behind him Marco, and telling him to wake up. He pulls out a syringe and tells Marco it's time to change. Marco seems confused, and according to Kyutaro, he doesn't listen to instructions well. But as he's injected with the syringe, Kyutaro calls him Rodemu and tells him it's hunting time. We now see that Rodemu has been constrained by finger cuffs this entire time, but in his new form, he rips them straight off. Kyutaro then instructs him to kill anyone he encounters in the building, and Rodemu blasts out of the room. The remaining hunters are distraught, saying that Rodemu will kill them too, but Kyutaro simply chastises them for not killing Usogi faster. Rodemu sprints through the building, killing the legless guard and then exploding onto the roof. He kills the guard up there as well, and then attaches a rope to the railing in order to swing down through the window of the floor Usogi is on. As him and Kaji are conversing with the guard they have hostage, Rodemu crashes through the door, flying directly in front of Usogi's face. The sheer force of his entry pulverizes the hostage hunter, and the final hunter appears, looking on in horror. Usogi feels the touch of death, and we see him imagining the Reaper holding a scythe to his neck. His nose begins to bleed, and he mutters to Kaji, "Run!" We then see that Usogi isn't speechless out of fear. He's actually having fun. He exclaims that nothing has changed since the beginning of the gamble, and that he entered the building to win. We then see the final hunter staring at Rodemu, contemplating if he can kill him while he's stunned from his landing so that he can escape alive. Rodemu actually speed blitzes his SMG, dodging every single shot, and then vanishes. The last guard assumes he went after Usogi and Kaji, but we see Rodemu slowly approaching, crawling on the ceiling behind the guard. He appears behind the guard suddenly, who pleads for his life. Kyutaro tells him over the radio that if he grabs the bucket on the floor, he'll spare his life. But as he picks the bucket up, it simply serves as a basket for his head to tumble into as Rodemu slices it clean off. Back to Usogi and Kaji, the latter of which begs for them to escape as soon as they can. But Usogi, smiling to himself, asks Kaji if he wants to see the old man's face filled with regret. We now learn about Rodemu's background. Kyutaro used to be a mercenary, and that allowed him to see secret army intel. The information contained inside was about a super soldier serum that basically altered the brain's chemistry to give soldiers more strength. This is what was used on Rodemu, or more specifically, Marco, Kyutaro's son. We see a younger Kyutaro forcing child Marco to kill people, training him as a soldier, and from the stress placed on him at a young age, the injection of the medicine triggered an alternate personality. That is Rodemu. Yako thinks to himself that this man is a heretic, and remembers back to when Usogi gambled against the 21st leader of Kakuro, Kuruma Soichi. Usogi was asked what he was betting on, to which he replied, "Everything. All I've got." It was assumed that this included his life. Kuruma Soichi was betting his seat as the leader of Kakuro. The bet Usogi suggested was a simple one. Would any planes fly overhead within 30 minutes? Specifically, Usogi was betting that there would be planes in the next 30 minutes. Apparently, Usogi had made plans to prepare 100 different air vehicles, taking off from various points, and had expected unpredictable circumstances. But in the 30 minutes, not a single air vehicle appeared. That meant Usogi had lost, and the leader told him that when or if he felt like it, he would come to claim Usogi's life. He also added that Usogi was so boring, he might forget about him. Usogi then lost everything in this gamble, and Yako, looking back, realizes that he and the leader of Kakuro are going to be pulled into Usogi's plan once more. We now see Usogi hiding the bag with the 10 million inside, telling Kaji that it likely has a tracker in it, and by leaving it on this floor, they can trick Kyutaro. Back in the office, we see Yako bend down to pick up a pen, and when Kyutaro questions him, Yako states that he simply dropped his pen. Back to Usogi now, he tells Kaji that he can feel it, and Yako thinks to himself that the pen was a trap set up by Usogi, and it contains a wiretap. Yako admits to himself that Usogi likely set this whole gamble up and intended to steal Kyutaro's membership from the start. Usogi's plan at this point is to storm the room with only Kyutaro and Yako and threaten them with the gun they've obtained, but Kyutaro sees through this and yells for Rodemu to return to the office. Usogi thinks to himself, if it wasn't in the bag, and claims he figured it out, telling Kaji they're switching to plan B. Kaji yells to Usogi, saying they left the listening device, the bag, behind, and tells him they basically threw away the money. Usogi turns around, telling Kaji that he's disgusting and primitive, but talented, saying Plan B is complete. The scene changes, and we see Kaji being approached by Rodemu. He thinks to himself that he gave it his best, and the rest is just a gamble. Kaji sprints away, barely dodging a knife strike from Rodemu, and Usogi appears, taunting Rodemu to approach him. Kyutaro screams into Rodemu's ear that it could be a trap, and to watch himself. We see Rodemu step into Caltrops, and Kyutaro tells him that together, he and Rodemu are invincible, and his target is the head of Kakuro. Usogi responds to him, addressing Kyutaro through Rodemu's earpiece, that he understands his will to control Kakuro, but this position is beyond his rank. Kyutaro tells himself that he's able to win no matter what, but then double takes. How did Usogi know about what he told Rodemu regarding his goal to surpass the leader of Kakuro? Kyutaro then realizes Usogi has been listening to his communications and thinks back. He remembers Yako finding the pen on the ground and stares at the referee. Yako, staring back down at him, shows no emotion, and Kyutaro contemplates if he's actually teamed up with Usogi. He demands for Yako to take out the pen, and Yako considers that Usogi planted the pen in order for Kyutaro to eventually find it, as a tool to make him uneasy. So Yako takes it out, and Kyutaro smashes it to figure out that it is a listening device. He demands for Yako to explain himself, who shares that there are no rules in this game. Even though he appears as an observer, he's free to behave any way he prefers, and he has the habit of interposing on the games to enjoy them more. Even though he's assisted Usogi, this is a gamble without rules, and he calls Kyutaro an old man, telling him to stop complaining. This sets Kyutaro over the edge, and he screams for Rodemu to kill Usogi. Kaji asks if they can possibly win, and Usogi tells him this is a gamble. They've done as much as they can, and the rest depends on luck. We see that Usogi has set up a trap involving rubble, caltrops, the gun, and a wire, blocking the gun's barrel and tying the wire to the trigger, causing an explosion from the blocked barrel whenever someone walks by. But Rodemu blocks it with the corpse of one of the hunters. Rodemu launches the corpse at Usogi and Kaji, and it collides with a web of wires they had set up. Kyutaro reveals that he saw through this trap, as well as the trick with the gun. Kyutaro has Rodemu throw down a handkerchief, telling Usogi to use it to wipe the blood off his face. His goal is to have Usogi beg for his life in order to create the ultimate pleasure, but Usogi simply tells him that he's given up, which angers Kyutaro. He tries to get Usogi to realize his worth so that he will fully beg for his life, but instead, Usogi simply asks him to save Kaji. Kaji sits up, saying that whoever is being saved by Kyutaro will likely be tortured, so he suggests Usogi be saved instead. They go back and forth, asking Kyutaro to save the other person until Kyutaro snaps. Kaji and Usogi simply laugh, with Kaji praising Usogi, saying everything has happened according to his predictions. This is when Usogi grabs a knife, standing up, and declares his victory is almost decided. Kyutaro screams at Rodemu, who's itching his eyes, and demands he moves his hand away from the camera attached to his head. Usogi shares that Rodemu can't hear him, due to his entire body being soaked in caustic soda. He reveals that around the building, he found ingredients and mixed them with the exploding gun trap in order to contaminate Rodemu. Any human is driven by their instincts and wipes their eyes when they come in contact with a foreign substance, which caused the caustic soda to irritate Rodemu's vision. With the close contact, Rodemu also inhaled the caustic soda, and in his delusional state, Kyutaro instructs him to blindly jump forward and attack Usogi. He leaps, and Usogi calls Kyutaro a liar, pointing the gun at Rodemu. As Usogi fires, we see Rodemu's abusive childhood flash before his eyes, and he's reverted back to Marco, who has one thought in his mind: who was I? Kyutaro heard the gunshot and is distraught, assuming Rodemu was killed. He then pulls his sword on Yako, claiming that since the game has no rules, he can simply kill the referee in order to eliminate the only witness to the gamble. Yako simply grabs his sword with 2 fingers, telling him that a referee is simply an agent to collect debts from any class of person, and being taken down by a bloodthirsty man like Kyutaro would be a disgrace to his referee name. He kicks the sword out of Kyutaro's hands, and as it falls, kicks the hilt hilt once more in order to launch the sword into the wall near the door, tossing the hat he's been holding behind his back to rest on the embedded hilt. As Kyutaro rambles about how he's seen life or death scenarios back when he was in the army, USOGUI appears, taking the hat from the sword near the door and pointing a gun at Kyutaro. Kyutaro claims that since USOGUI has a weapon and he doesn't, he's lost the battle, and tells USOGUI he's won, and to take all of the prizes. But this isn't enough for USOGUI, who claims that this is a no-rule game, and since Kyutaro suggested the terms, it would only end when one of them has perished. Kyutaro attempts to offer money, but USOGUI instead offers a deal. Either give up everything he asks for, or die. Therefore, Kyutaro hands over all he has, including an additional 20 million yen and the deed to all of his real estate. These deeds include the abandoned building they're currently in, and since USOGUI now owns it, he tells Kyutaro the tables have now turned. He instructs Kyutaro to leave the building, claiming it's time for hunting, and he is now the prey. As Kyutaro walks through the hallways, he chuckles to himself, claiming he can escape safely. USOGUI then puts on the earpiece in the office. He clears his throat, and Yako is stunned. He's perfectly mimicking Kyutaro's voice, telling Rodemu to begin hunting the prey. Rodemu then appears behind Kyutaro, who's surprised that he's still alive, thinking to himself that USOGUI is in for a surprise now. Kyutaro crouches down, accidentally dodging a murderous kick from Rodemu that sends a couch out the window. We see that USOGUI is in Rodemu's earpiece, and that his sight still hasn't returned. Not only that, but Kyutaro notices that Rodemu also can't hear him, since his ears are plugged up with something. Yako inquires with USOGUI if his blindness was really caused by caustic soda, and USOGUI admits he actually just made mustard gas from chlorine and detergents, and that's what took away Rodemu's eyesight. The gunshot that had been fired was actually USOGUI shooting the overhead light, and while it was dark, he put on the night vision goggles and then injected Rodemu with a muscle relaxant he found in the building's clinic. Since he was injected, Rodemu reverted back to Marco, inquiring with USOGUI about who he is. USOGUI told him that is something he needed to find out on his own, and then blocked his ears with the tape. Lastly, Kaji injected Marco with an empty syringe once more in order to revert him to Rodemu again, and then ran to hide. We now see Kyutaro running from his deranged son, and he tries to climb upstairs to lose Rodemu, which doesn't work. This is because USOGUI is giving Rodemu directions in the earpiece, and as USOGUI laughs to himself watching the cameras, Kyutaro begins to realize this might be the end for him. We see USOGI's mouth closing in around the abandoned building, and as Kaji appears at the office door, USOGUI calls Marco to the office as well, telling him he needs to discover himself. Marco asks Kyutaro if he's his child, to which Kyutaro answers he is, of course. He asks Marco to help him kill the enemy, and then we get a flashback. When the gunshot originally rang through the building, Kyutaro told USOGUI he had killed that Marco, the timid child who was abused by his father. Back to the present, he claims he's now neither Marco nor Rodemu. His face is now more human than monster, tears pouring out of his eyes, and he screams at his father, "You are." Yako and Kaji finish the statement, "A liar." USOGUI replies, "Damn right." With all threats now neutralized, USOGUI simply needs to leave the building. But first, Yako asks about his secret. In the office is a series of lights on a monitor used to track what floor USOGUI was on, meaning there was a transponder mounted on him from the beginning. USOGUI admits he first assumed it was in the bag of money, which is why he left it behind. But this didn't stop the lights from changing when USOGUI arrived to the office alone. That means the transponder was on USOGUI, but Yako questions how Kyutaro managed to discreetly plant something on his person. USOGUI claims it's simple really. He used something impossible to discard. Money. The coins that were used in the cheap poker game they had played before the abandoned building gamble were the transponders. Yako then has one final question. Was his aim from the beginning to obtain the soldier known as Rodemu? USOGUI replies that he's mistaken, claiming he doesn't need a fiendish assassin on his side. Everyone heads downstairs to where Marco and Kyutaro are, and USOGUI explains to Marco how he was kidnapped by this man who ran experiments on him. USOGUI explains how his alternate persona, Rodemu, killed lots of people, and he tells Marco that he himself is not a killer, but also not totally innocent because of his alter ego. Marco asks what he can do to fix this, and USOGUI replies that he's burdened with his sins and must atone. He must keep on living. Marco, confused, asks how he can atone. USOGUI reaches an arm out, asking Marco to follow him. and he'll help Marco atone for his sins. But Usogi says he will never ask him to kill a person. That is what Usogi meant when he told Yako he was mistaken. He didn't want to obtain Rodemu, he wanted Marco. With that, the gamble has officially concluded, with Usogi taking control of Kyutaro's Kakuro membership. Yako then thinks to himself, realizing that when Usogi lost the gamble to the leader of Kakuro previously, he may have actually done this on purpose. He admits that all of Usogi's power was controlled by Leader, and him losing could have been a plan to free himself from Leader's shackles and build power secretly. Yako reveals that when Usogi lost that gamble, he was actually smiling. After the abandoned building, we see Yako asking Usogi what his goal is in taking over Kakuro, to which Usogi replies, "World peace? Maybe," which makes Yako laugh. A mysterious woman then appears at the abandoned building, where Kyutaro was never killed. He attempts to run away, but is caught in a whip the mysterious woman wields. She demands that he share what gambler defeated him, and Kyutaro curses Usogi. The woman is stunned, asking if it's the Usogi they all know of. We then see Kyutaro's dismembered body rotting away on the floor of the building, before seeing the official outcomes of the gamble. Usogi has officially won. We see a woman in the street robbed of her purse, and Kaji yells at someone to not interfere. That someone is Marco, who turns to Kaji and claims Usogi said stealing is wrong. He's got a childish mental capacity due to the influx of drugs he was forced to test, so his speech is very broken. Marco demonstrates this by turning to the robber, saying, "Don't worry, Usogi doesn't steal life." Kaji hands the stolen purse back to the woman, who notices the bag Kaji is clinging to desperately. The bag is from the abandoned building gamble, and we now see what happened directly after. Usogi read through Kyutaro's files and learned that Marco was stronger than an ordinary human, and the strength change was due to his personality switching. He then breaks the news. Kaji will be the one adopting Kyutaro's Kakuro membership, becoming a member himself, not Usogi. This membership is a big deal, with Usogi sharing that only 48 people in the world have one. This isn't Kaji's main concern though. He's worried about the $300,000 they won from Kyutaro. Kaji claims this is more money than he's ever imagined having, and the sheer amount has him nervous. To this, Usogi gives him some advice. He shares that earning money simply leads to more selfishness, and that someone consumed by the urge to make more money will become a selfish monster. With this, he instructs Kaji to not be charmed by money, since in the end, it really is just a piece of paper, which is nothing compared to the life that humans have. To make sure Kaji isn't overtaken by greed, Usogi instructs him to take the $300,000 and go waste it on a gamble with Marco. This is how Kaji ended up encountering the woman who was being robbed, and the very same woman suggests Kaji follow her to a secret gambling location that will allow him to spend the massive sum. Before they head inside, we see a flash to the casino, where a man named Samemaru has taken over. Down on the street, the girl walks Kaji to the front, and then gets a phone call, telling Kaji to head up and tell the owner that she recommended him. We see Kaji's plan to turn the money for a profit, and dumbfound Usogi at his gambling prowess. Since Samemaru has just taken over, he doesn't know about any members, especially not the one vouching for Kaji. But since he's carrying a massive bag of money, Samemaru is happy to welcome him inside. As Samemaru shares that nobody else is there, and he'll be their opponent, Marco loudly states that a chunk of his ear is missing, saying it was bitten by a rat. The mysterious man behind Samemaru snaps, thinking Marco was making a fool of apparently his big brother. We learn this man's name is Magoroku, and he goes to swing at Marco, who easily dodges it and drops Magoroku to the floor with a kick to the chin. Samemaru apologizes, asking them to forgive his brother, and Kaji notices that the way these guys talk about each other places them as Yakuza. Because of this, Kaji and Marco turn to leave, and Samemaru changes his tune, now asking the two to leave their money behind for injuring his brother, saying he will find them and injure them if they decide to leave now. Kaji, even though he knows it's just an empty threat, is still tempted and agrees to gamble. They decide on a game to play, 7-card poker. It can be pretty complicated, but the basic premise is a more psychological Texas Hold'em. Since more cards are visible to the opponent in 7-card, it's more centered around bluffing your opponent out. Since Samemaru suggested the game, Kaji spends some time checking the cards, eventually revealing he actually has no idea what he's checking for. The first round passes with both gamblers attempting to read each other. Kaji attempts to bluff Samemaru out, who ends up raising him and ultimately wins. wins. Kaji's glad though, convinced he now understands his opponent. We see him slowly lose more money throughout the next rounds though, adopting the mentality that he simply needs to win more the next round after every loss. As time passes, it finally happens though. Kaji has run out of money. We then see that Kaji grew up incredibly poor as a child, rejoicing over a measly 100 yen, and the fact that he just burned enough money to support him for 10 years makes him an absolute fool. But he also doesn't want to let the gamble end as it is. He pulls out the remaining money he has, saying he will pay the additional money necessary afterwards if he loses. Samemaru simply laughs, saying he can't trust the word of a gambler, and Kaji pulls out his trump card, asking Samemaru if he knows about Kakuro. Suddenly, the room is filled with suited men. Up wheels a bald old man. Referee number 1, Nowami Toshi. Samemaru demands he won't continue the gamble unless Kaji offers up his Kakuro membership, but Nowami claims this is impossible. He tells Samemaru that he himself is not worthy, claiming Kakuro also functions as intermediaries, so they're capable of determining the worth of humans. Nowami taps on his head, waking up his brain, and then claims Samemaru's worth is 1 million yen. Next up, he judges Kaji's worth, and after calling him truly terrible, deems his worth as 100 yen, or one singular dollar. Kaji bursts into tears, and even Samemaru snaps, saying living humans can't be measured by simply putting a price tag on them. Nowami sees through this, guessing Samemaru is simply saying this to make Kaji think he's actually looking out for him. His real goal is the Kakuro membership. At this point, Nowami explains, if the two decide to bet more money than they have on them, and one of them loses, Kakuro will simply make them disappear and sell their corpse. Samemaru is worried, thinking this will scare Kaji away, but the opposite happens. Kaji snaps back to reality, stating that he's pitiful, and glancing down at his empty bag, he finds a secret pocket containing Usogi's staple, the candied plum. He tears the plum open and asks Samemaru if he'd like to join for a final game. Kaji rips up the cards they've been using, saying they're giving him a bad feeling, and points to an unused box of cards on the counter nearby. Samemaru smirks to himself, declaring Kaji a foolish idiot. Before the gamble starts, however, they must resolve the situation of Marco punching Magaroku, and they decide to let him return a punch to Marco. Samemaru's plan here is to just have Magaroku kill Marco with a flurry of blows, but after one punch lands, we see Magaroku's hand with broken bones protruding out of it. Marco bursts into tears, yelling that it hurts, and says he did what they wanted, and Samemaru has to now play with Kaji. The gamble begins with Nowami offering a $2 million loan to Kaji, which is the maximum Kakuro can sell his body for if he loses. Nowami inquires why he simply doesn't offer his membership as collateral, to which Kaji responds it's not his to gamble, and if he dies, it'll pass on to Usogi. Since Magaroku's hand is now broken, they attempt to find another dealer, with Nowami suggesting a random Kakuro member named Gyoshu. Kaji declines, saying that anyone dealing could be cheating, so he suggests they place all the cards in the deck face down on the table and pick blindly. Nowami has a suggestion though. If Kaji's worried about cheating, they could change the rules to outright ban it and allow Kakuro to handle any cheating. But Kaji fires back, saying Kakuro is a third party and he can't trust them. Everyone involved thinks to themselves that this will be over quickly, since Kaji has obviously blown a fuse and is paranoid. Kaji psychs himself up, accepting that he must win this to enter Usogi's world of gambling, even taking a page from his playbook and claiming he will devour Samemaru. The game starts and the explanation gets incredibly complicated, but Samemaru's basic plan is as follows. He knows Kaji only has 2.2 million. If he continues to raise to the max every round of betting, the pot will come to 6.4 million, or 3.2 million per player. Since Kaji will be a million short, he'll have to fold. We get to the 5th round and it plays out exactly how Samemaru planned. Even though he admits his hand is incredibly weak, Kaji now has no money to continue betting. But suddenly filled with determination, Kaji claims that he successfully implanted a misconception in Samemaru's head, and in a gamble, assumption is dangerous. He rips open a zipper on the original bag and whips out enough money to match the bet. Kaji thinks to himself that this was Usogi's plan all along, and he knew Kaji would lose and planned accordingly, putting extra money in this secret pocket. We know that Samemaru's hand was garbage, and Kaji reveals his, which is also bad, but he ends up winning off a high card ace. Kaji shakes with excitement. Is this what they call winning? He asks himself. Now, instead of being controlled by money, he is now the one in control. Kaji stands up, thanking Samemaru for the game and says he's learned his lesson. Samemaru is pissed. He wants Kaji's membership, so he proposes a deal. One more game, but he'll pay 6 times whatever he loses. Samemaru has seen through Kaji, saying that people cannot change, and he's still controlled by greed. Kaji does exactly this, sitting back down for one more game, and Samemaru reveals his trick. These are deuce cards. By crossing your eyes, players are able to see through the back of the cards. Every set of cards Samemaru offered were engraved with this trick, and it means Kaji is at a massive disadvantage. Samemaru, using his X-ray vision, declares what each player will have, him with a full house of queens and Kaji with a full house of eights, confirming Samemaru's win. The two continue betting until both players have their hands. Samemaru's full house of queens and Kaji's full house of... Samemaru is stunned. Kaji has the ace of spades, forming a full house of aces. This means that Kaji switched the cards, and Samemaru chuckles to himself. He sees the real 4th ace on the table, meaning one of Kaji's aces is from a different deck. Samemaru begins to tell Noah about Kaji's cheating, stating that he will face a fate worse than death when he suddenly chokes on his words. If he reveals the deuce cards, Kokoro will punish him as well. Samemaru settles on telling the referee that he physically saw Kaji switching cards, and decides to request a body check on him. As he decides this, Kaji's ace slips upwards. It's only the upper half of a torn card, placed there to let Samemaru know that Kaji has seen through his play with the deuce cards. That means Kaji suggested a swap of the deck to throw off Samemaru, when he really set up the face-down deck so that he could also utilize the deuce cards. With that, Samemaru is busted. Everything Kaji has done up to this point was to set him up, and if he wins this hand, Kaji will simply reveal his cheating method. Due to this, Samemaru goes to fold, but Kaji stops him. He tells Samemaru to place a bet of 3.2 million before withdrawing. And with the 6 times multiplier that Samemaru agreed to, that will allow Kaji to make back everything that he lost. Knowing he's been completely defeated, Samemaru agrees and concedes, but the money he owes has now reached 38.4 million. He's 5 million short, so he calls the company backing him, and they only laugh, saying this was a foolish gamble for him to partake in, and someone like him could never attain a Kokoro membership. With that, it falls on Kokoro to collect, so Nawami calls a guard behind him, Chris Lee, to take the building and kill Samemaru. Kaji, realizing what's about to happen, claims the money owed isn't important. Samemaru attempts to stop Chris Lee, but is easily dodged and blasted into the air. Since one person themselves is only worth $2 million, he also turns to Magaroku, when a hand suddenly appears on his shoulder. Marco appears, claiming Magaroku is injured, and to take his body instead. Nawami wheels up to Kaji with a devilish expression on his face, asking if he'd like to gamble on who will win this battle, Marco or Chris Lee. The stakes are as follows. If Marco wins, Samemaru and his brother will be spared, but if Marco loses, Nawami will take control of Marco. Based on what Yako shared, Nawami has inferred that Marco is in fact Rodemu, and he wants a soldier that strong on his team. As this is being discussed, Marco yawns, claiming he hates bullying weak people. Chris Lee charges him and Marco jumps back. As he's still in the air though, Chris Lee lands and pounces again, landing a punch straight to Marco's jaw. Chris Lee declares the match over with Marco knocked out, but a sudden kick causes his nose to begin to bleed. Chris Lee is stunned. Marco is uninjured and lands 2 nasty kicks to his body. We then see Lee's braid wrapped around Marco's ankle, which allows him to slam Marco into the ground, followed by a disgusting curb stomp. With that, Nawami claims the gamble is now over, saying he will take Rodemu and make sure Kaji gets the remainder of his earnings. Kaji is stunned, and Nawami shares with him that this is what happens when people become associated with Usogi. He guesses that Kaji was enchanted by Usogi's charm, and tells Kaji that to Usogi, his life is dispensable. Nawami even goes as far as calling Usogi a death god, existing to guide humans to their destruction. Just then, the Kokoro guards inject Marco with a syringe, presumably to sedate him. Kaji looks distraught, They've awoken Rodemu. Faster than anyone can react, he bounces off the walls, landing behind referee Nawami's chair, declaring his hatred. Kakuro jumps into action, and we see swarms of officers surround Rodemu. One of them grab Nawami's chair and wheel him away, but Marco leaps after them. An officer takes Nawami out of the chair, carrying him away as Rodemu is attacked. In one swift strike, he takes out everyone chasing him. But Nawami has been delivered to safety and is surrounded by the masses of Kakuro. In the back, though, we see a mysterious swatch of hair stand out from the rest. Lee is yet again facing Rodemu now, whose face distorts to a horrifying smile, declaring he wants to kill. As Lee calls him a devil, Rodemu lands a powerful kick onto his chin. Lee is then dragged, completely helpless, across the entirety of the wall. Lee contemplates to himself how Usogi managed to get this man on his side, stating that this sheer power shouldn't exist outside of Kakuro. We now see Nawami direct his attendant to have everyone with guns shoot Rodemu, but his attendant claims it's impossible. He shares that everyone with a gun, in the midst of the confusion, has lost all communication in their earpieces. Only one person could plot something like this. And as the attendant's face is revealed, we see it's none other than Usogi, disguised as a Kakuro agent. Nawami is told that he will become a chess piece for Usogi to move as he pleases. We learned that all of this was aligned with Usogi's plan. He wanted a referee that wasn't stubborn and would give in to his demands, so he picked Nawami specifically. Kaji finally spots Usogi, stunned as to how he arrived here, and we see a flashback to Usogi tracking down Kaji's phone to find his location. He tells Nawami that he needs something arranged, and we see another flashback, this time from Nawami's perspective. He's talking to a mysterious man solving Rubik's Cubes with one hand, who tells Nawami that a troublesome character has entered the country, a revolutionist and terrorist, Sadakuni Iki. He was apparently an old Kakuro member, whose sole goal upon joining was to participate in terrorist activities to earn endless amounts of money. The Rubik's Cube man claims that no Kakuro members want to gamble with him due to his track record, but if someone who wants to appears, it's Nawami's job to see the gamble through. Back to the present, we see the two devils' interests align. Usogi wants a gamble with Sadakuni, and Nawami wants to see a gamble that excites him. We then see the rumored man himself gambling in a casino, with endless stacks of chips in front of him. The woman who killed Kyutaro appears, licking her lips, saying she'd like to play with him. We learn that this woman is Kurama Ranko, the owner of this casino. She's watching Sadakuni on monitors, and determines that some of the bystanders are also working with him. Kurama speaks to the man behind her, Leo, asking if he could subdue the men, and he states that if they are unarmed, he could pull it off. As Kurama begins to secure the casino, prepping for battle, Sadakuni gets a phone call and simply smirks to himself before cashing in and leaving. He shares that the phone call contained information regarding Usogi, the one man in Kakuro who would be willing to gamble with him. Back at Usogi's hideout, Kaji's dwelling on the information he received during his gamble, worried that Usogi is simply using him as a pawn. As he considers this, Usogi shares that he told Kaji to squander all the money, but instead, he came back with more money than he started with. Not bad, he says to Kaji, who suddenly decides he can never run away from Usogi's charm. The scene changes to a pompous man surrounded by employees. He's part of the Setsuo group, and he apparently lost a gamble and owes Kakuro his life. The man assumes his group to be incredibly strong, and as Yako appears, the Setsuo members laugh, since one single man can't possibly harm them. He declares that he's not here as a referee, but instead as a collector, pulling out a pistol stash in a nearby rice basket and brutally murdering most everyone in the room. The few remaining Setsuo members rush Yako at once, who kicks them away, pulling 2 more guns and emptying both magazines while still midair. He apologizes to the pompous man, the only one left alive, and says he normally uses his hands, but had to resort to using guns since he has an upcoming mission as a referee. Yako inquires with the man what he'd like his last words to be, and the man begins to beg for his life. Spare! He's then cut off. Hopeless, Yako declares. As he kills the man, Yako then says, if you are unable to pay, then don't bet. We're shown all this to understand Yako's mentality. He claims that a fat pig or someone betting his life solely for money doesn't have the right to gamble with stakes that high. But someone who works towards achieving something other than money is precious and is someone whose life has value. That is why he considers Usogi as one who is able to gamble with his life on the line. Yako then arrives, with Usogi, Kaji, and Marco in tow, to a tunnel surrounded by Kakuro agents. This is a gamble between two Kakuro members, and Yako explains to Marco that each member has a designated referee assigned to them at the first gamble they take place in after joining Kakuro. Even so, the referees must stay neutral, although they may stray slightly from this due to their personalities. Yako declares that he is Usogi's exclusive referee, and this comforts Kaji, viewing Yako as a trusted ally. Sudden footsteps then echo through the tunnel. Kaji begins to sweat, but Usogi grabs his shoulder, saying that Kaji should be in a good mood since he's had a sort of power-up from his poker game. We see that Kaji is drawn to Usogi yet again, who makes him feel important and needed. Yako arrives at the door to the room where the gamble will occur. But there's a problem. Since the information about Rodemu has been made public, the opponent has requested that both sides only have 2 members plus their referee. This means that Kaji, who's inexperienced and holds the membership, must bring either Usogi or Marco. Usogi simply claims it's alright, and states that Marco doesn't need to enter with them. This upsets Marco, but Usogi claims he has another task for Marco to complete, whispering it into his ear. With that, Kaji, Usogi, and Yako enter, finally coming face to face with their opponents. As soon as the door shuts behind them, we see Marco sprint away, jumping into the woods above the tunnel. Back inside, the opposing referee introduces himself as Makama Kiro, number 10. Sadakuni claims there's no time for introductions, demanding Usogi to sit in the chair opposite him. Usogi does exactly this, asking if the reason Sadakuni wants the gamble to end quickly is because he plans to hand over all his money. This sets Sadakuni off, who throws a knife that grazes Usogi's cheek. Kaji's horrified, demanding Yako to issue a punishment. Yako simply stands stoic, sharing that the gamble has not started yet, and with no rules set, even if one side murdered the other, there would be nothing the referees could do. The knife gets things moving though, with Usogi claiming the bet is $50 million. Sadakuni chuckles, claiming this is a sorry amount, and has his partner whip out a gun. Usogi instructs Kaji to show the goods to convince Sadakuni, and Kaji whips something out from a bag. It's another gun, specifically the SMG from the abandoned building, and Kaji's shocked. Yako claims that with equal firepower now displayed on both sides, the gambling can now proceed, and Usogi shares that there is a method to increase the amount of money wagered. Sadakuni isn't having it, screaming that he couldn't care less if this turns into a gunfight. Kaji, frightened by his outburst, misfires the gun into the ceiling. It's now Yako's turn to yell, who says it's time for the referees to step in, and explains that the method Usogi mentioned to increase the wager is putting a price on his own life. We then see referee Nawami, who I'll call Noah from now on to be succinct, watching the gamble on the cameras, saying something seems off. On the other side of the cameras, Sadakuni shares that he is only willing to bet with everything he has. Since he re-entered Japan, he's gambled 5 times and amassed a total of $1 billion. This stuns Kaji, but Usogi and Yako are unfazed. We then see the smoke fade from where Kaji accidentally shot his gun. He destroyed a camera. Makama, the opposing referee, claims that what Usogi is talking about isn't selling his body for a simple $2 million. They must call the man owners. As someone stitches up Usogi's cut cheek, he explains to Kaji what this means. These man owners are like horse owners, wealthy investors who back gamblers like Usogi. If he wins, they get their original money back plus 30% of any money he makes. In short, they're gambling on the gambler. 20 of these investors appear on the monitors with their faces hidden. Yako tells them to begin, and the speakers erupt with voices, contributing millions each. The total climbs to over 100 million. Makama remembers that Usogi lost a gamble to the leader of Kakuro, which all of the investors are aware of. Some of them aren't betting on Usogi's success here. They are praying for him to lose again for their own twisted enjoyment. As the count slows down to just shy of 500 million, still not enough, a lone voice screams out, $1 billion. This massive bet spurs the other investors into a frenzy, and when the numbers finally slow, Usogi has raised 2.5 billion yen. Sadakuni is stunned. "What on earth?" he says. Usogi simply smirks. "This time, it's you who's short on money," he taunts. Sadakuni now has two options: bet with the original 1 billion or acquire his own investors. Makama warns him about the latter. Although it will allow for a bigger bet, losing investor money will have them demanding a gruesome death. Yako now turns to the monitors, inquiring of the investors what they would like to happen to Usogi if he is to lose. The one who contributed 1 billion chimes in, suggesting death by hangman. The other investors excitedly agree, but Makama claims this is unfair. Just because the investors gave Usogi money, that isn't grounds for them to decide the entire gamble. The referees end up in a verbal standoff, making up reasons why the other side should concede, until Usogi interrupts, claiming it's no trouble for him to bet more since it's a gamble he's going to win. Makama turns to Sadakuni and shares that this version of Hangman is the children's game with a sadistic twist. The loser will actually be hung. Sadakuni claims this is no problem, stating that he will win this gamble. With that, the game of Hangman is decided, and we see that the 1 billion yen investor was none other than Karama, claiming Sadakuni made a fool of her at her casino and she will make sure he dies. Outside in the woods above the tunnel, we see Marco following Usogi's directions through the tunnel over the mountain in order to reach the opposite side. As he swings from the trees, we learn that Leo, Karama's henchman, is also in the woods. He hears Marco's movements and hides, watching Marco sprint by. We also learn that Usogi instructed Marco to hide on the other side of the mountain and await his call. Marco stops in his tracks and turns, approaching slowly, causing Leo to prepare for a battle. He draws nearer, only a few trees away, and then drops his pants to piss. It's revealed that Leo has also been instructed to head to the opposite side of the mountain to spy on Sadakuni's team. Back in the gambling room, the money has been prepared, and card games are scattered across the table. Usogi and Sadakuni are told to come to an agreement as to which card game will be used for Hangman, but Sadakuni simply requests a blindfold so that the decision is random. He shares that due to his myopia, or nearsightedness, he can't see without his glasses anyway. Usogi agrees to this method, shuffling the card games, and Sadakuni picks one: Old Maid. Old Maid itself is simple. There's 21 cards, 2 copies of each number 1 through 10, with the final card being the Old Maid. Players take turns picking a card from the other player's hand. If you can form pairs of numbers, they discard it, and then it's the other player's turn. Whoever ends up with the Old Maid at the end loses. But for this Hangman game, the Old Maid card will be randomized, replaced by Hangman numbers 1 through 5. The number on the Old Maid card at the end of the round dictates how many parts of the gallows will be built. It takes 11 steps to complete the gallows, so depending on the Hangman cards picked, the game could end in 3 rounds. If the rounds end with 5, 4, and then 3 or 2, the gallows will be complete. With that, the game is prepared. Usogi versus Sadakuni Iki, the terrorist. The loser will hang. Yako confirms the rules. No violence during the game, and since the investors will be watching, their audio and the feed of their faces will be disabled inside the gambling area in order to prevent them from assisting the players. There's just one rule left to confirm. If there is cheating unnoticed by the players, Kakuro will not interfere. Yako checks with the players, who both smirk, confirming that this is okay. Yako then states that he and Makama will shuffle the 5 gallows cards and one will be picked randomly each round. The players will be dealt the 21 cards, one with 11 and one with 10. The player with 11 picks first, and then the game will commence. The person dealt with more cards must be determined somehow, and Usogi whips out rock, paper, scissors. He throws rock and Sadakuni throws paper. Usogi is lost, but his gaze suddenly becomes stone cold. He smirks, and ping! He switches his rock to scissors, happily declaring that he won. A vein pops in Sadakuni's head, and Usogi chuckles, claiming he doesn't actually care and will let Sadakuni decide. "You fool," Sadakuni spits. "The one who has less cards has an advantage." With that, the order is decided. Yako shuffles and asks Makama to cut the deck and insert a random Old Maid. Suddenly, a piece of fabric falls. Makama has dropped a handkerchief. How stupid, Yako thinks to himself, and drops his own handkerchief on top. The cards are then dealt, Usogi with 11 and Sadakuni with 10. Kaji glances at Usogi's hand and is shocked. He has 4 pairs, and on top of that, he holds the old maid, the worst one, numbered with 5. Naturally, as both players discard their pairs at the start of the game, Usogi is left with only 3 cards, and Sadakuni with 2. Usogi picks first, knowing it will be either a 6 or a 2, and pulls a 6. It's now Sadakuni's turn. If he picks the 2, he wins, and if he picks the old maid, Usogi could make a comeback. Usogi smirks, taunting Sadakuni, and points out a card. "This is the one you want," he says. "Pick it for yourself and see." Bang! Sadakuni whips a card out of Usogi's hand, the 2, leaving Usogi with the old maid. "You're a liar, aren't you?" Sadakuni asks. Usogi claims he just pushed his luck this turn and rapidly taps his pocket. Kaji notices this and assumes Usogi is trembling. Sadakuni tells Usogi to show his card, but he simply drops it to the ground, claiming the number is what he can see printed on the card. Sadakuni hesitates, finally glancing down, and grabs the card himself. He waits until he flips it towards the referee to claim it's a 5, and then instructs the referee to build 5 parts of the scaffolding. A massive door is opened, and ominous darkness pouring through, and suited Kokoro agents lug out massive parts. Usogi stands motionless as they are built behind him, 4 legs, and the prop. Makama decides to explain the difference between this hangman game and a normal execution by hanging. In a normal hanging where the floor is dropped out, this causes cardiac arrest due to the impact of the body falling, which can lead to a painless death. In hangman, however, there is no floor dropping. The body will simply be lifted up by the neck, causing a much more excruciating and drawn-out death. Kaji is sickened by this description, stating that he can't imagine the nerves of someone who's taking part in this gamble. He glances over at Usogi to confirm this, but he's smiling. He points to Sadakuni, saying that gambling is all about the fear of defeat. Fearing death pushes you to win, and Sadakuni, who claims he won't die, has entrusted his life to fate, which will inevitably lead to his demise. "If you want to preach your sermons, then do it after you win," Sadakuni fires back, and the second round begins. While Yako and Makama are swapping the decks due to some of the cards being bent, Kaji notices Usogi rapidly tapping his foot, yet again assuming he's incredibly anxious, and rightfully so. Kaji can't see any methods of cheating being used, adding that these aren't deuce cards, but says regardless, he feels that Sadakuni has some unusual superpowers, as if he can see through the cards. Something clicks in his head. It can't be, he thinks to himself, whipping around. Usogi appears, playfully teasing Kaji, asking if he saw someone behind him. "I feel as if there's someone looking behind us and sending signals about the cards," Kaji states. But the round continues anyway. This one takes longer than the first, which allows Kaji to think. He states that the system itself has no room for cheating, so this is truly a game left to luck. The round continues with Sadakuni holding only 2 cards, one of which is the old maid. Usogi moves up close, contemplating, and then informs Sadakuni that he can actually see the card's reflection in his glasses. For a brief moment, we see Sadakuni lose his composure. Usogi's taunting hits home. "So what? Draw that card and see for yourself," he states, regaining his cool exterior. Usogi snatches a card. It's the Hangman. Dumbfounded, he stares at it. He then claims it isn't over yet, as Sadakuni now has to pick the correct card from him. He picks, and Usogi is left with the Hangman card once again. The number it displays is 4. With this, Usogi glances up. The scaffolding is only 2 steps from completion. At this point, Kaji begins to worry that the Usogi could lose here. It seems like Sadakuni is unbeatable. The third round begins, and it's Usogi's turn to pick, but he simply stares. 20 minutes pass, and Sadakuni finally snaps, demanding the referees create a time limit. Usogi claims this is a fair alteration to the rules, but says if they're changing the rules, they must restart the game completely. Sadakuni loses it again, calling Usogi an eyesore, and Yako agrees that they cannot invalidate the game. He then suggests a 1-minute limit between each card choice. We then get a flashback to the past. Yako is visited by a mysterious man, referee Kiara, who says that he's leaving Kokoro. Yako retorts, asking if the reason for this was Usogi's defeat in surpassing the leader, revealing not only when this flashback occurred, but also revealing that Kiara was Usogi's first exclusive referee. Kiara claims that this has nothing to do with it, and when Yako shares that nobody is allowed to leave Kokoro alive, Kiara fires back with "So What? We end the flashback with a statement from Kiara. There isn't a person in this world that keeps on living. Such a human being does not exist, USOGUI included. A gambler who keeps on winning forever does not exist in this world. Back to the present, we see USOGUI lose his 3rd round in a row, drawing the hangman card labeled 1, putting him 1 loss away from a guaranteed death. Yako reminisces on his conversation with Kiara, and we see something else Kiara shared. "I don't understand USOGUI's motives," he said, "but I know one ritual he has. When his predictions and the events unfolding in his gambles are aligned, he teases his opponent with 1 move. You know that one, don't you?" We then see USOGUI do exactly this. In the face of death, we see USOGUI munching on a plum. We then flash to a news anchor speaking about military weapons being leaked around the world. The man who is watching this is none other than Kakeru's leader, and a man identical to Yako, save for a scar across his face, tells him it'll start soon. Back to the gambling room, we see USOGUI losing the 3rd round, with the next round deciding his fate. Sadakuni claims his losses are due to the difference in their resolutions. He rages, claiming the guts he has to risk his life will lead him to victory. "For me, your life is nothing but a means to dominate others," he screams. We see Noah and Kurama watching on the monitors, smiling at Sadakuni's enraged state. Suddenly, a phone rings out from behind Sadakuni. His partner glances down and nods to Sadakuni. The caller is a mysterious mustached man who explains that he has brought the weapons, specifically a rocket launcher smuggled in illegally, and reveals that the money Sadakuni is gambling for is the payment for that rocket launcher. Outside, we now see Leo watching Sadakuni's men, who are armed and ready to attack. Leo realizes he lost sight of Marco, who suddenly appears next to him. He still has the mind of a child, so Marco hastily introduces himself and explains how he was tasked to do the same thing as Leo. Since their objectives have aligned, Leo tells Marco to stick with him, and they follow Sadakuni's men to the rocket launcher. Leo quickly discerns what's happening. They plan to launch the missile somewhere in Japan, and he quickly calls Kurama. She shares that the location of this gamble is on the border of 2 prefectures, and with Kakeru also guarding the gamble, it basically makes this a lawless area. Sadakuni plans to use this to launch the missile safely, and Leo asks if Kurama can somehow help USOGUI win. She shares that the massive donation was assistance in itself, but she could also call Kaji a certain number of times to dictate what card USOGUI should pick. However, she claims that she wagered the 1 billion using her own intuition, and refuses to cheat in her own gamble. It all comes down to USOGUI himself. Back inside, the situation is grim. Sadakuni has a singular card, and has to pick from USOGUI's 2, one of which is the old maid. Kaji fears for USOGUI's life, claiming it's all over. In a close-up shot, we see USOGUI holding the cards over his shoulder, and then suddenly moves them close to his body, swapping the cards' positions and shuffling around in his shirt, claiming he's looking for something. Sadakuni hesitates, and USOGUI finally finds what he's looking for, another plum, and tells Sadakuni to pick a card already. Sadakuni hesitates, and as USOGUI holds the cards back out, he's frozen for a moment. Damn, he chides to himself, and reaches out with shaking hands. He draws a card, the old maid. USOGUI moves his remaining card to cover his face, and we see a devilish smirk appear. For the first time, Sadakuni missed. As USOGUI goes to draw the new cards, he tells Sadakuni the flow of the game has changed. By this round, I know your habits. I know you put the old maid on the right side as a habit. After this draw, the game won't be the same as before. Instead of glancing at the card he drew, he hands the pair off to Yako, stating, I don't need to check. Sadakuni is now left with the hangman card dictating a 3. He declares that this was simply a bit of luck before USOGUI's inevitable death. USOGUI fires back, saying he remembers Sadakuni saying something about gambling having nothing to do with luck. Sadakuni is now fuming. With the newly formed gallows on the opposing side, the two begin the next round. After the pairs are made, it's a mirror image of the game's start. USOGUI has 1 card, and Sadakuni has 2. He now holds the cards in front of him, obviously still wary of USOGUI's taunts about the reflection in his glasses. Kaji notices USOGUI's rapid finger tapping once more, and he starts rambling about a movie as he continues tapping. Finally, Usogi snatches a card, declaring it his win once more. Sadakuni crushes the Hangman card, yelling to his referee that it was the number 4. Usogi then declares that from here on out, he's no longer playing Old Maid, since he won't draw the Old Maid ever again. If the Old Maid is dealt to you, you will die, he taunts Sadakuni. Makama bends down to pick up the crumpled card, and Usogi throws his down too, claiming he forgot the referee's name and calling him Kitaro. Makama scoffs. The next round then begins, and the Hangman card is a 5, but it's dealt to Usogi. This is the last round for both of us, Sadakuni exclaims. He reaches for the final card. One will win him the game, and the other will give Usogi a chance to win. Usogi declares, "This one." He points at the left card, telling Sadakuni to pick it. Sadakuni's eyes widen. This isn't good, he thinks. He reaches for the card, a distraught look on his face, inching towards the Hangman, and freezes. "What's wrong?" Usogi asks. Sadakuni doesn't respond. Did he? No, don't tell me. Sadakuni's head is a jumble of chopped up thoughts. Yako chimes in, reminding him that there are only 10 seconds left for him to pick a card. Was it really not a coincidence? Did he actually aim for that? Sadakuni glances back at Kaji. Is it because of him? He draws the card. The observers are silent, and then the outcome is called. Sadakuni has drawn the Old Maid. What did I do? I was supposed to be perfect. I wasn't supposed to miss, he thinks. Yako contemplates to himself. It seemed at the end of the past 2 rounds, the second Sadakuni reached for a card, Usogi pushed the Old Maid slightly forward, prompting Sadakuni to take it. But this is much too obvious, Yako thinks. If Sadakuni believed Usogi was doing this, he simply could have picked the other card. Yako's thoughts are suddenly interrupted as Sadakuni screams for Usogi to pick. Usogi just continues tapping his pocket, claiming he will use the minute provided to the fullest. Suddenly, confusion erupts throughout those watching. Everyone is stunned into silence. What does he think he's doing? Kaji thinks. This is beyond comprehension. What on earth is going on? We finally see what's happened. Usogi is standing inches in front of Sadakuni, looking straight at his cards. Still, Sadakuni continues to demand Usogi pick one. Only one bystander can fathom what is occurring. Yako begins to put the pieces together. This is beyond the limits of common sense. It isn't something that can be seen through, he thinks to himself. This game is already a cheating battle. The men outside the gamble with the arms dealer have gone silent. For the first time, they're worried about Sadakuni's victory. Usogi still hasn't moved, but Sadakuni isn't reacting, still angry about Usogi stalling. Yako continues to think. Why did Usogi crumple his cards up when Sadakuni did the same? Why didn't Sadakuni, who was so dead set on winning, not demand a check on the pair that Usogi discarded without looking? Usogi had planned to declare his victory there, even if he pulled the Old Maid. Just like then, this cheating now, Usogi standing inches in front of Sadakuni, has gone undetected. Draw it quickly, Sadakuni demands yet again. Yako thinks to himself, even this egregious cheating by Usogi won't be punished by Kakaro unless detected by the opponent. Sadakuni's partner has realized the same, willing Sadakuni to realize what's happening and say Usogi is peeking. Kaji's lost. Why won't he say anything? I'm not meant to die here, Sadakuni thinks to himself. We see Usogi's mouth, as it has when the gamble is all but decided, begin to engulf Sadakuni, who grips the metaphorical jaws with his hands, fighting against the inevitable, claiming, I will not die here. Back outside, the arms dealer is relieved. He claims that if Usogi picked the Old Maid to spice up the game, one of the man owners will cheat and share the location of the cards with Sadakuni's teammate. A narrator chimes in, explaining that nobody knew what was happening, but the winner always laughs deeper. That very same laughter echoes from the gambling room, coming from Sadakuni. But more laughter, deeper laughter, comes from Usogi. And they say the loser is always the first to go silent. We're then given a mysterious new angle, one from above the shoulder of Usogi, like someone is watching from the ceiling. The Old Maid looks strange. It's an 8 with the Old Maid drawn onto it. The one who notices this is none other than Sadakuni. But how? The cards are only visible to Usogi. He turns over his left shoulder towards the ceiling. Oh my. "Did you get busted?" he asks. The frame pans out, and we see that Usogi is still staring at the ceiling. I'm sure you're watching from that camera at this moment. Sadakuni turns in what we now know is a camera's view, revealing the actual hangman card. Yako declares Usogi the winner, but first asks him to bring everything to light. And oh boy, is it complicated. Sadakuni is completely blind, and Usogi claims that he knew his sense of vision was likely rebuilt artificially. Artificial vision is some sort of medical technology, allowing those who have gone blind to see through cameras connected with electrical impulses. Usogi discovered this by watching Sadakuni closely. When Kaji discharged the gun, Sadakuni didn't react, but his teammate did. And when they played rock, paper, scissors, Sadakuni waited until the very last second to throw his pick. This is because both of these occurrences were in the camera's blind spot. He also noticed a delay in the very first round between when Usogi dropped the card, when it was picked up, and when Sadakuni turned it to the camera in order to declare the number. Usogi reveals that his incessant tapping the entire game was him counting the timing between the camera's movement shifting. He determined that there were 6 different cameras Sadakuni was using to cheat, the active one shifting counterclockwise every 10 seconds. But this still doesn't explain a major flaw. How did Usogi peek at Sadakuni's cards without him ever noticing? Kaji interrupts at this point, asking why Usogi didn't just cover the back of his cards, and Usogi chuckles. He claims that this would allow for Sadakuni to simply perform a blind pick, leaving it fully up to luck. When Yako noticed a card was torn and switched the deck, that was Usogi's doing, in order to inconspicuously use that time to observe the cameras. That's when he discovered Kaji's massive assistance. Kaji's confused, and Yako glances up, finally realizing it. When Kaji misfired the SMG at the beginning of the gamble, he destroyed a camera. This meant that when the camera cycled to that specific one, Sadakuni was living in 10 seconds of complete blindness. Usogi stalling for 20 minutes in order to prompt the creation of a time limit was all part of his plan, 1 minute being enough time to ensure a full cycle of all 6 cameras. Usogi then tested it, shuffling around and moving to block the view of the currently active camera. And the fact that Sadakuni waited to pick until the cards were exposed to a camera confirmed his usage of them. When he declared his win without looking, this put the image of his confidence into Sadakuni's head. Usogi then rambling about the Titanic movie was done to purposefully pull the card in the 10 seconds of blindness. He held up his cards then, purposefully hiding the card he had just pulled behind his other one, declaring it as his win. Since he declared such a strong win the last round without even looking, Sadakuni, still blind, assumed Usogi's win based only on his declaration while he was still in his 10 seconds of blindness. He then crumpled his card out of anger, and Usogi did the same, making it so that Sadakuni couldn't tell if he actually pulled the old maid or not once his vision returned. The blindness was also why Usogi slightly pushed the old maid forward. Since Sadakuni was blind during those 10 seconds, he inevitably picked the card that was pushed more forward. Usogi then reveals more. He was fearful of a round where the cards were drawn perfectly, all forming pairs instantly, and he had to pick, forcing him to take the old maid. He shares that if Sadakuni had simply depended on luck, he could have had even odds, but someone who planned to cheat from the start wouldn't have such courage. The guts to gamble with your life? Even jokes need some thought, Usogi declares. You are nothing but a big liar. Nawami, who's watched this all from the monitors, is dumbfounded by Usogi's ploy and claims that this artificial vision is an incredibly rare medical procedure, which demonstrates how deep Sadakuni's connections go. He also begins to doubt the neutrality of referees, assuming Sadakuni's referee knew what was happening. That aside, nobody on the opposing side saw through it except for Usogi, the cloud that devours all. Hearing about this loss, the arms dealer outside erupts into applause, claiming Usogi was simply a brilliant gambler. He shares with Sadakuni's men that, as his special treat, he'll install the final technology, allowing them to fire the missiles anyway. Sadakuni's men say they must go retrieve Sadakuni first, since the entire thing is his plan. Marco, still watching Sadakuni's men, gets a call from Usogi at this point, who tells him to continue observing. Back inside, the man owners are chanting for Sadakuni to hang, and his teammate wants him to stall a bit longer in order for Sadakuni's men to come and save him. Yako then asks Makama, since he was Sadakuni's exclusive referee for his past 5 gambles, if he presided over them, did he know of the cameras, since this would be unfair. He's interrupted by Makama. You old fart with weird eyebrows. Stop asking me things," he exclaims. He then turns to the man owners, claiming the ranking challenge has been declared. This is a match between referees, and the man owners notice what had happened at the beginning of the gamble. The handkerchiefs of each referee are embroidered with that referee's number, 2 for Yako and 10 for Makama. Kaji, confused, asks Usogi to explain. Kakuro has 101 referees, numbered from 0 to 100. The newer a referee, the higher their number, and to climb the ranks, they must challenge a referee with a lower number in order to take it. Usogi explains that they used to have meaning, but are now only for show, since they would be unfair for referees like wheelchair-bound Noah. Yako prepares for battle, taunting Makama by saying he has questions, but will ask him as his face is buried in the ground. Makama suddenly flies towards Yako, throwing a devastating punch. We see Yako on the ground, Makama declaring that his face will be the one kissing the concrete. The two continue to trade blows, Yako demonstrating surprising agility for a man of his age. They're both flung into the air, with Yako landing perfectly poised. He beckons for Makama to approach him, a smirk on his face. "Please, come at me," he says. Makama laughs, stating Yako should have attacked him when he had the chance instead of wasting it taunting. "A wasted chance to attack?" Yako asks, holding up Makama's ear. The man owners declare this is a battle of the beasts, with both emanating a killing aura. Back outside, we see Leo has prepared a sniper. The scene then flashes back to the ranking battle, the man-eater's cries for death interrupted by Sadakuni's ally. He claims that they are instead the ones who will die. Sadakuni attempts to silence him, but his ally continues to ramble, claiming that their armed allies will burst in, saving Sadakuni and taking the money regardless of him losing the gamble. He also reveals the missiles, saying they will be fired. All the man-eaters, fearful for their lives, disconnect from the call. Only one remains, Kurama. She taunts Sadakuni's ally, saying it would be a shame if their armed comrades were taken out by a lion, meaning Leo. We see gunshots echo through the woods outside, and then the door to the gambling area cracks open. Sadakuni's ally chuckles, claiming his allies have finally arrived. Everyone is silent until a voice rings out. "You're a hindrance," the man who entered through the door states, stomping Sadakuni's ally into the floor. We then see his face. It's the man who looked exactly like Yako, with a scar on his face. Behind him appears an eye, piercing through the darkness. Kakuro members in suits suddenly swarm into the room. "Leader," Yako thinks to himself. From behind the scarred man emerges a figure, whispering something to him. He plays a trick, telling everyone that these two are aliens who have arrived from a planet to invade the Earth. The Kakuro members, including Yako and Makama, burst into laughter, and the scarred man tells the leader that his joke was a huge success. But the leader suddenly points, claiming that some people aren't laughing. Usogi, Kaji, Sadakuni, and the man who is curb stomped upon their entry. He even claims that he can feel others nearby who aren't laughing, and Noah, watching through the cameras, along with his attendants, cover their mouths in surprise. Sadakuni, aghast at the injury his ally has sustained, sprints at the scarred man with a broken piece of glass. The scarred man, calling Sadakuni trash, instantly shatters the glass and aims a death blow at his head. "Die!" he exclaims. Blood drips onto the floor, and we see Makama halting the blow. He claims that since the gamble hasn't officially concluded, nobody is allowed to lay their hands on Sadakuni. "So you're Sadakuni," the leader says. He reveals that he knows of the missile plan, and claims that all of Sadakuni's allies are dead by now. The scene flashes back to Leo, who's dumbfounded. Before he was even able to shoot the sniper, the gunshots were actually bombs that decimated all of Sadakuni's men. We learn that the arms dealer had set off the bombs, and he explains that since Sadakuni lost, the plan has changed. The bombs were to make it seem as if the terrorists had committed suicide, and Sadakuni will die in the hangman gamble, leaving no evidence. He then reveals that Kakuro has been using Sadakuni the entire time. Back inside, the leader ensures Sadakuni that the missiles will still go off, but Usogi interrupts, saying the target will actually be the leader. He reveals that Marco has been sent to deal with them, and because of Marco's pure heart, he will take the missiles and Usogi will find a meaningful way to use them. Usogi then plays into the leader's joke, saying that meaningful use will be the Earthlings using the missiles to eliminate the bad aliens. The leader asks the scarred man about who is speaking to him, and the scarred man explains that this is Usogi, the one who lost surpassing the leader, but whose life collection was postponed to a later date. "Ah, so that kind of thing happened," the leader muses. He then declares it's time to collect Usogi's life. Back outside, Marco appears appears in front of the arms dealer, who has a man shrouded in darkness behind him. Leo watches from his sniper's post, when suddenly the shadowed man's eye turns. He's spotted Leo. A knife suddenly hits Leo's gun, thrown by the same man who instructs the lesser soldiers to go deal with Leo while he handles Marco. Back inside, Yako and his near clone face off, the scarred man attempting to brush by to kill USOGUI. Yako stops him, and a flurry of blows and blocks are exchanged, ending with Yako reiterating that the gamble is not yet over, so USOGUI is safe for the time being. The leader finally agrees, saying he'll watch the end of the game. We see a conflict occur in Yako's mind. Was he acting to save USOGUI simply because of the game, or because of a personal bias? If Rodemu can't make it on time, USOGUI will die, he thinks to himself. USOGUI then addresses the leader directly, crafting up yet another gamble. He bets everything he made today on the missiles not being launched, placing his trust in Marco. This gamble is between him and the leader, and as the leader contemplates, Kurama chimes in, saying she will also bet her investment earnings on the same thing, the missiles not being launched. The leader takes a seat, saying he will participate, but claims this will be a boring gamble, since he will win no matter what. I am the one that will keep winning until the end of time. May this be God's will, he ponders. Back outside, we see Marco facing off against the shadowy man, who is revealed to be none other than Kiara, USOGUI's old referee. Marco is still on the phone with USOGUI, who tells him to kill the arms dealer first, whose name we now learn is Carl. Kiara turns around, telling Carl to crouch, allowing him to dodge an otherwise fatal kick from Marco. Kiara asks if Marco is friends with USOGUI, and his voice is picked up over the phone, with USOGUI saying, "It sounds familiar." USOGUI reveals that the leader knew all of this would happen. He gambled on the missile launch because he knew Marco would have a difficult battle with Kiara. Things start picking up, with Makama and Yako readying to resume their battle. Outdoors, the soldiers approach Leo, sprinting through the woods armed with pistols. One is taken out with a knife through the head, and the others dash into the trees. They fire blindly. Leo dashes into the trees as well, and then drops behind one of the gunmen, breaking his neck and using his gun to kill another. The last soldier charges him head on, Leo delivering a kick to the stomach, launching the man into the air, followed by a shot to the head. The knife the man was carrying is grabbed out of the air by Leo, who claims he hates bullying weaklings. This sentiment is mirrored by Marco, who says the same thing to Kiara. Kiara chuckles as Marco jumps at him, claiming he will in fact be the one being bullied. Marco launches a kick, easily dodged by Kiara, who dashes behind him and takes out his knees while hitting a pose. The next kick is aimed at Marco's face, and as it grazes his lip, he narrowly dodges under it. Marco flips away, and we see that the brief contact from the kick ripped an entire layer of skin off his chin. Leo carefully observes the fight from the woods, and Kiara declares out loud that no matter who he fights, they will inevitably be killed. Leo resists the urge to join the thrilling fight, remembering that Kurama asked him to prioritize stopping the missiles. Sorry, Marco, he thinks. Don't get killed. Marco looks down, spotting a knife on the ground. Kiara chuckles, saying he can use it, even offering to let him pick up a gun next to it on the ground. Marco claims he doesn't need any weapons, but laughter echoes through his mind. We see Kyutaro taunting him from the grave, telling Marco he needs the weapons to defeat this strong enemy. Kyutaro's ghostly figure continues to speak, telling Marco to remember his training in assassination and murder. Marco, now frightened, attempts to sprint past Kiara to stop the missiles. Back inside, another fight rages on. Yako versus Makama once more. Makama's blows are deflected by Yako, the former claiming Yako has underestimated him. We see that one of the punches actually made contact, peeling a layer of skin off of Yako's cheek. This is a mirror image. Both Yako and Marco are injured in similar ways. Marco continues his mad sprint towards Kiara, receiving a devastating blow to the chin for his carelessness. Meanwhile, Yako is being chastised by Makama, who calls him a brittle old man. A punch flies towards Yako's face, and he looks fearful for a mere moment, before easily catching Makama's fist and delivering a retaliatory blow. Makama is stunned. "Huh?" is all he's able to utter before Yako prepares a backhand, blasting his opponent backwards. Yako actually agrees with him, stating that he is in fact getting older, and fighting this battle is seriously taxing on his body. We learn that this is simply a front, with Makama admitting he was unable to see his last attack coming. Yako claims that Makama still hasn't revealed his full power, saying he's using all of the power his fragile body has left. This is just more taunting, and Makama gulps. The leader chimes in, saying this fight is boring him. He sees through Yako's tactics, who wants to draw this battle out as long as possible to allow Marco to arrive and save Usogi. Makama thinks to himself that he has no other option, and must now take the third route. Outside, we see Kiara call Marco a useless source of power, standing over his bloody body. Kiara claims that if this is all of the power Usogi's allies have, he will inevitably lose. Kiara claims that he only found excitement in Usogi's lossless record, and after he was defeated by the leader, Kiara lost all interest. The phone is still active, which Kiara picks up and says this same thing to Usogi. Suddenly, a figure appears behind Kiara. Leo has joined the fray. He shares with Kiara that he's not working for Usogi and simply joined the fight in order to taunt him. A cat, disguising itself as a lion, Kiara sees. Leo glances down at Marco's body, digging his foot into the dirt, claiming he'll make the battle quick, and then kicks the dirt into Kiara's face. As Leo approaches, we see his heel hook around the discarded knife, which disappears as he jumps at Kiara. Leo throws a downward punch, easily dodged, and Kiara retaliates with a kick to Leo's face. It's blocked, but damage is done to Leo's hand. Stray cats always claw their way towards victory, Kiara taunts, as the two exchange blows. We see Kiara's tie get cut into pieces, and Leo suddenly holds the knife that he launched into the air before the fight began. Kiara praises his distraction with the dirt and admits Leo has killing skills on par with the referees. As Kiara flicks his leg forward, Leo suddenly whips one of his legs back, revealing a gun tied to a string that's attached to his leg. He grabs the gun, aiming it forward, but we see that Kiara flicking his leg was actually done to launch his shoe, breaking Leo's fingers, causing him to drop the gun. What is he? Leo thinks to himself. A knife is thrown by Leo, but Kiara has already dodged towards him, swiping Leo's legs out from under him. As he's midair, a punch from Kiara flies towards his face. Nearby, Marco is still sprawled on the ground. As Kiara's devastating punch lands on Leo, a look of surprise crosses his face. Marco is now standing in front of his own unconscious body. Ethereal. Kyutaro's ghost appears, telling him to leave the pain of living behind. He tells Marco that since he's gentle at heart, the monsters he's fighting against have the advantage since they'll be happy to kill him. Come on, let's leave this world together, Kyutaro says. Marco fights back, saying he's still alive and must stop the missiles. He throws a punch at Kiara, but is teleported into Kyutaro's room in the abandoned building. None of this is real. Kyutaro tells Marco that it's impossible to live in this world without murder, but Marco refuses. Kyutaro tells him that as his parent, he will be pained seeing Marco continue down this path. But if he reopens the part of his mind that contains Rodemu, he can become Usogi's weapon. To do this, he must accept that as a weapon, he must kill. I will be Usogi's savior, Marco thinks, but suddenly turns on his heel, revealing yet another door in his mind. Not that one, Kyutaro yells. That path is dangerous and filled with demons, he exclaims. Through the door pours light, and we see images of Usogi and Kaji, the former's words echoing through Marco's mind. I will never ask you to kill. As Rodemu fights to escape from his door inside Marco's mind, we learn that Kyutaro was evil to the core, simply attempting to get Marco to return to his devilish ways. Even in Marco's mind, Usogi drops his signature line. You are a liar, aren't you? He says, showing that Marco can be a soldier without being a murderer. Marco then runs to join his friends. Back in the real world, Leo is sent flying, but a shadow looms from behind his fallen body. We see Kiara's view for a brief moment, a devilish form standing in front of him, before it flashes back to reality. He's not the same man as he was a moment ago, Kiara admits. I'm not planning to kill you, but if you hinder me, I'll kick you to death, Marco screams as he jumps at Kiara. I don't give a shit about you. Marco's kick is blocked, damaging Kiara's hand, and a punch connects with his face. As it lands, Kiara shifts, rotating with the motion of the punch, ending up behind Marco, sustaining only a bloody nose. Kiara erupts into laughter. Now I remember, he thinks. It's been a while since I was injured. This is fun. He dodges Marco's next punch, moving to his side, and using the momentum from the punch, flips Marco forward. Leo is back up at this point, thrusting a knife towards Kiara, who simply strikes Leo in the back, sending him flying once again. Kiara is the only one left standing, but he suddenly senses bloodlust. Something pierces through him, and he looks down at Leo. Leo smirks, revealing he set up his sniper to remotely fire at this exact location, but due to its lack of precision, the shot missed any arteries. Kiara quickly realizes it wasn't killing intent that he sensed, but for the first time in his life, it was the sound of his own defeat. Marco emerging from the dust to strike him. We now get to see Kiara's history with Usogi, and their first gamble together. Usogi had nothing at this point, new to Kakarot, and was gambling with a notorious rapist. The politician, losing badly, realized no rule was made forbidding violence. Kiara realized this and moved to interfere, but was halted by Usogi's words. Usogi read Kiara perfectly, realizing his hatred for the psychopath he was facing, and used this to stun his opponent into not acting. Kiara praises Usogi after the game, saying it's a shame that he could only win 10 million. "You've got it all wrong," Usogi says. He shares that 10 million was all he could win without losing his life to his opponent, and that strength is not always the best trait. But, he adds, if Kiara's menacing figure wasn't the referee he was provided, he would have lost for sure. "You'll be the one to watch me continue winning," Usogi claims, eating his plum, and Kiara bursts into laughter. Back in the present, we see Kiara on the ground, thinking to himself that Usogi's claim about strength not being the best trait was correct. Marco is the only one left now who can move, and Leo yells for him to handle the arms dealer and the missiles. Back inside, Usogi learns that Marco is victorious, and taunts the leader, saying that his plot backfired, and he will lose a large amount, larger than the total of the bets placed in the Hangman game. This is where the overarching goal is revealed. Usogi inquires where the missiles were aimed at, and although Sadakuni declines to answer, Usogi reveals he knows. The target was the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and the goal of Carl's contact was to short the stocks. Basically, by betting that the stocks would drop and then bombing the stock exchange, the contact would make exorbitant amounts of money. Usogi guesses that this contact is the leader of Kakarot. Therefore, if the missiles are stopped, whoever the contact is will lose everything he put into this bet. Usogi speaks to Sadakuni behind him, sharing that his revolution has been nothing more than a way for others to make money. He then brings up the fact that the missile launchers were delivered before the gamble had even concluded, which is strange. This meant that Sadakuni was simply there to take the fall for the terrorist act, and the contact is the one moving behind the scenes. Usogi claims that all of the liars, including the leader, will be the losers here. At the missile launcher, Carl is furiously typing to activate it, laughing delusionally at how much money he's about to make. Suddenly, he's no longer sitting in the chair, but floating in the air, ripped out by Marco. Carl is dumbfounded. How was Kiara defeated by this man? Carl begins to worry, not about the money, but claims that if the missiles aren't launched, he will surely come for Carl's life. Back inside, the new gamble is being prepared, with Usogi and Kurama's combined 1.5 billion piled up, and Usogi tells the leader to bring his money out, stating that today's game is your loss. The leader pulls out a Rubik's Cube, solving it with one hand, and then freezes, reminding himself of Usogi's name, as we learn that for some reason, the leader solves the Rubik's Cube once a month. The leader reiterates the gamble. Either the missiles will be launched, or they won't, and then explains that Kakarot has no part in Sadakuni's revolution, and mumbling to himself, states that he doesn't remember telling a lie in response to Usogi's earlier claim. Suddenly, a voice chimes, Kurama, informing Usogi that just now, the missiles were launched. Everybody freezes, sweat dripping down Usogi's face. Kaji tells himself that this isn't real, that they can't believe the words of Kurama without seeing it themselves. Leo, on the phone with Kurama, is the one informing her of the missiles launch, but he tells her to wait a second. "I was wrong," he says. "Those aren't missiles, they're rockets." Apparently, the launcher had 6 rockets and 1 missile loaded, and the rockets were what fired. Due to their short range, they'll simply crash into the forest. Kurama scolds him for frightening her for nothing. Kurama then considers how this will affect the gamble. Since the verbiage of missiles can be considered ambiguous, this gamble that is solely based on a verbal agreement could go either way. Leo, on the launch site, wonders what went wrong with Marco. We see him stunned in the launcher seat, and then a flashback starts from the moment we saw him throw Carl out of the launcher. Carl shares that the missiles are already on a countdown, but tells Marco he'll tell him what buttons to press in order to stop the launch. Marco, fingers shaking, presses a button, the wrong one. The missiles launch, and outraged, Marco flies out of the launcher, but Carl has already disappeared. We learn that Carl was actually trying to help Marco, but he genuinely did just press the wrong button. With the gamble still undecided, the leader focuses on the battle between Yako and Makama first. The ranking battles currently only exist for enjoyment, so the leader reinstates the old rules. To minimize the time referees spend in these battles, time that could be contributed to overseeing a gamble, a limit of 10 seconds is placed on the ranking battle. One side must kill the other before the 10 seconds end. The leader shares that the two have already fought for 5 seconds, so the time limit will be cut in half. If no victor is determined by the end, the one who initiated the challenge, Makama, will be killed. If you aim for a higher position, he says, you must gamble your life. The battle then resumes. At the count of 1 second, Yako has already launched Makama into the air with a kick. The time ticks as he flies through the air, and Makama's life flashes before his eyes. Since he was a child, he was gifted with intellect, strength, and power. He realizes in these few seconds that in the grand scheme of things, he was insignificant compared to Sadakuni's commitment to his goals, revealing that he was truly on Sadakuni's side this whole time. The 5 seconds end, and Makama is prone on the ground, but still alive. This means that the ranking battle was a failure, and Makama will be killed. The leader reveals that he knew about Makama's cheating and his bias towards Sadakuni due to referee Noah informing him, but there's no need to punish him anymore. With 2 gallows existing from the Hangman game, the 2 will now be hung together. Sadakuni exclaims as he's about to hang that his revolution being toyed with for money was bullshit, claiming more people should have died. Usogi walks up to him, but Sadakuni claims he won't get to see the writhing face of a dying man, saying he is not afraid of death, and this is simply his fate. Usogi counters, claiming this isn't fate. Instead, his death is his punishment. He removes Sadakuni's glasses, which are how he sees through the cameras, plunging him into darkness. Usogi then inquires, how can you know that death isn't scary if you've never died before? Makama simply thinks to himself that Usogi is a fool. Since Sadakuni is so dead set in his ambitions, he won't have any regrets, and therefore won't fear death. But in complete darkness, as Sadakuni listens to the ropes begin to rise, his mind races. I almost made it. If I could see again, the revolution could succeed. As the noose tightens, he snaps. I don't want to die, he screams. As Makama is raised next to his comrade, the one who he idolized for so long and the one who is now begging for his life, he rages, cursing Sadakuni that he's become a disgrace. What the fuck was I doing all of this for? Sadakuni screams, and the 2 die together. Usogi then speaks, stating that he wouldn't let Sadakuni die as a monster, at least letting him die as a human. In his final moments, Usogi reverted a fanatic into a simple human with a crippling fear of death. With that, the gamble has concluded. Usogi will receive his money, and the game will end. With the money returned to the investors, Usogi and Kaji are left with 250 million. The scarred man asks Kaji to confirm the amount, but he knows as soon as that's done, Usogi's life will be taken. Usogi also knows this, and prompts the leader to pay up his portion of the missile launch game, stating that the rockets being launched means the leader still lost. Surprisingly, the leader agrees, but claims he's a little short on money at the moment. Since this wasn't a Kokoro gamble and simply personal, he tells Usogi the payment will be completed whenever he has the cash on him. No way, Usogi exclaims. He now threatens the leader, saying one shouldn't gamble if they don't have the money to offer in the first place. But it doesn't matter, he says. Since it was a personal bet, there's nothing he can do. His face doesn't show the same emotion though, hinting that he has an underlying plan, which the leader realizes. The leader puts together Usogi's plan. If he proceeds with killing Usogi, Marco will launch the missiles at the tunnel instead, killing everyone inside. He ponders this, the scarred man picking up his chair and carrying him around as he debates his options. He could give in, or he could call Usogi's bluff and simply strangle him. I have never misjudged a situation, he says, declaring his decision made. We learn that the decision is to spare Usogi's life, as the leader and the scarred man walk away. The leader reveals that Marco couldn't have aimed the missiles at the tunnel quick enough, and the scarred man is confused. Then why, he asks, and then suddenly realizes it. A shadow appears behind them. Kiara has arrived, the scarred man taunting that the 2 losers are getting along, and reminding Kiara that although he's letting him stand here, his life is under constant threat due to his leaving Kokoro. We learn that Usogi, after Kiara was defeated by Marco, spoke to him on the phone. He explained to Kiara that if he joins his side, he'll be able to witness the supposedly non-existent perfect gambler, and Kiara decides to join him once more, since he yearns to see somebody that can never lose. Back to the present, the leader receives a call on his phone. Are you the one known as the leader? A mysterious voice inquires. The leader is dumbfounded as to how this person got his number, and the mysterious voice simply states he has enough power to somehow attain it. He says that Carl was his ally, and he wanted the missiles to be launched. He then tells the leader to go and launch the missiles. The leader's face is shrouded in shadow, the scarred man looking on, emotionless. We flash back to when the scarred man and the leader were preparing to leave and come to this gamble, and we see a group of mysterious men. 4 are named, all with high up political positions. It's kind of hard to explain this part of the plot without understanding political positions, but basically, 3 men have called these 4 politicians in. The 3 men, who are part of the public prosecutor's office, are scheming some sort of coup, attempting to sway these 4 politicians into helping them. A new man enters, the public prosecutor general, walking in. The 4 politicians are stunned. This man holds incredible political power. He suggests that they all work together to push a politician to the top, basically taking over Japan's political scene for themselves. The police system is apparently incredibly corrupt, and this man wants to create a new organization that supports the country and monitors the police force, one even stronger than the current police. One of the politicians, with a strand of hair in front of his face and a mole on his forehead, says that this sounds interesting. The prosecutor general says they need a catalyst, some sort of massive event to create public dissent around the current politicians, something like terrorism. The politicians are stunned, but the man with the hair strand claims that something like rockets or missiles being launched, made to seem like a terrorist act, could work. The prosecutor general asks the 4 politicians to plan for this secretly, and we learn that was the overarching goal of the mysterious group in the shadows. Back to the present, the leader refuses to launch the rockets, saying he has the power to do so, but that's no fun. He tells this mystery caller that if they also failed at launching them, they need to accept defeat, and shares that he had nothing to do with the shorting of the stocks. This means that USOGUI was actually incorrect. The one shorting the stocks, working in the shadows, wasn't the leader, but in fact, somebody else. This part is kind of hard to follow, but basically, there were 3 groups aiming for the missiles to be launched. One was Sadakuni with his terrorist plots. One was the group in the shadows shorting the stocks. The other were these politicians looking to use the terrorist act to stage a coup in Japan's current political scheme. The caller then scoffs, claiming the leader has made an enemy today, and the call is cut off. Outside the gambling tunnel, the prosecutor general is waiting, who claims that the rockets that were fired still exploded. Even though they didn't hit the target and only blew up in the woods, the media will still talk about it, creating dissent within the government. The prosecutor general claims the 4 politicians, correcting it to 3, will be part of the leader's monthly gamble. We see the flashback to the man with a hair strand talking about the rockets being fired, and his sentence is cut off. If this was a reality, he stops. The leader picks up the sentiment in the present, saying, "Even a single rocket would be enough. I've involved myself in a strange gamble." He then explains that this month's game has concluded, and that this new force that functions above the police will be manipulated and staffed by Kokoro. We now get a massive reveal. For the first time, we see the leader's face, claiming that this is how a revolution is done. But his face looks familiar. He has a strand of hair and a mole in between his eyes. The 4th politician from before, the one with the same features, is the leader, using his political power to create a new government branch. If this seems a bit confusing, he's basically attempting to create a Japanese version of the FBI, but completely staffed by Kokoro, giving him power to control the country. Now that we've seen the leader's face, we flash back to him discussing the results of the gamble with USOGUI. USOGUI offers up his earnings from the Hangman game, as well as the money he's owed from the rocket gamble, and tells the leader that in exchange, he wants to become a Kokoro member once again. He claims that it's time for him to step out of the shadows and become serious about aiming at the ultimate gamble, the one he lost at years ago, surpassing the leader. The two simply stare at each other for a moment, and then the leader claims he was expecting USOGUI to use the money to cancel the collection of his life. About that, USOGUI says, "You seem sort of forgetful. Is that it? I'm forgetting again?" The leader asks. USOGUI confirms this, saying that's exactly right. With that, the leader accepts his deal and reveals that he saw Kiara peeking through the door, claiming there's a 1 in a million chance he could have been killed if he confiscated USOGUI's life. Kaji is dumbfounded. He snaps at USOGUI, screaming, asking why he didn't use the money to save his own life, saying that becoming a Kokoro member is simply throwing his life away even more. He glances at the 2 that were hung, demanding to know why he continues to risk his life, saying USOGUI could end up like them. USOGUI simply states that he feels the safest when his life is at stake, when he's in a Kokoro gamble. With that, the Hangman game has officially been completed, the losers perishing and USOGUI coming out victorious. But the ending is interrupted. The leader turns as he goes to leave. "Before I forget about it," he says, "since I reverted the referee rankings back to their original importance in the duel, that means the surpassing the leader gamble has also been reverted. This means that to participate in surpassing the leader, the challenger challenger's referee must obtain the rank of 0. So in order for Usogi to participate, Yako must become the highest ranked referee. He taunts Yako, saying it might be difficult for a man of his age. Of course, sir. I've never had much interest in strength anyway, Yako claims. The leader chuckles, telling Usogi to go ahead and say it. Yako's confused, but Usogi simply laughs. Yako, in other words, he's saying you are a liar. Kaji wakes up from a horrible nightmare where he was the one hung on the scaffolding. Usogi notices that the gamble took a serious toll on Kaji and tells him he doesn't need to force himself to be involved in the gambles anymore. Since Usogi is now a Kakuro member, Kaji can step back. Kaji tells him that's cruel and claims he assisted Usogi in all of his gambles in some way or another. Usogi simply gives him money left over from the gamble and goes to get groceries with Marco. What am I saying? Kaji thinks. Usogi could have won without me. You're just too far ahead of me. We see Usogi and Marco leave the hotel room and pass by a woman and man moving towards the room they just left. A knock sounds on the door and Kaji opens it. The woman is actually Kaji's mother, and Kaji asks why she's there. Usogi watches this happen, but simply leaves with Marco. We learn that Kaji's mom is an awful parent, and complains that since Kaji went into so much debt, she couldn't borrow any money to go on vacation. She's been taking out loans in Kaji's name, but because of his debts, nobody will allow her to borrow using Kaji anymore. She says this now makes him a useless child, and Kaji is ashamed. She asks Kaji to come rent a boat with them, her face a depiction of evil. Kaji's glad Usogi isn't there to watch, since this woman makes him feel truly worthless. He snaps, telling his mother to take the money Usogi gave him and to never speak with him again. Do whatever the fuck you want, he yells. His mother and her strange escort leave, laughing at their good fortune, saying they should go to the casino. Usogi watches this happen, fuming. A bit later, we see Kaji run down to the casino, asking why his mother called him. We see her dripping sweat, gambling at a poker table with none other than Usogi himself. He tells Kaji that even for somebody with terrible parents, he must overcome it and become a better person. If you can't separate yourself from these people and continue to wither away because of your mother, you have no way out of this, he says. Kaji's mother jumps up, asking if Kaji knows who this man who sucked them into a gamble and took all of their money is. Who is this referee guy, she asks. Kaji's stunned. Referee? From behind him, a man speaks up, introducing himself as Kushinada Tetsuma. Before Kushinada can explain, Kaji interrupts him, saying he already has figured out what's happening. His mother, sucked into a poker gamble with Usogi, lost everything she had and more, and has called Kaji here in order to get permission to gamble his life. If she loses, Usogi will get full control of Kaji. Usogi's surprised at his quick assessment. That's my Kaji, he praises. Kaji agrees, but under one condition. If Usogi loses, he must give up his objective of surpassing the leader. Usogi instantly agrees, and Kaji's stunned. He's so easily agreed to giving up something that he's been working so hard to get. The hands are then revealed. As the cards are flipped, we see Kaji's mother with a 3 pair of kings. Usogi begins to flip his cards, and Kaji thinks to himself, Usogi has basically treated his life as a means to a gamble, but he should have expected this, since Usogi tries to take everything through gambles. With the cards revealed, Usogi is the winner with a straight, and Kaji is officially Usogi's property. But Kaji realizes something. Usogi bet on his life's goal, surpassing the leader, on a game like poker that is so dependent on luck. That's basically like Usogi gambling his life in order to obtain Kaji. This is Usogi sending him a message, showing him his worth. For Usogi's goal, having Kaji on his side is a necessity. Kaji smiles, telling his mother that he can overcome her abusive parenting. He bids her farewell, but the escort jumps up to stop him. He tells Kaji that they're in deep shit without money, asking how he could throw his mother away like this. Kaji turns, not to the man, but to Usogi, asking if there is a ban on violent actions in this game. Not at all, Usogi replies. Is that so? Kaji says, delivering a swift uppercut to the man's jaw. Kaji tells the man that he's lucky, saying he simply lost money, and if he had won, Usogi may have just killed him anyway. Usogi, technically taking part in his first Kakuro gamble, inquires with Kushinada what his referee number is, since he's technically Usogi's new referee. Remember, Yako is associated with Kaji right now. Usogi, taking up a pose to fight, tells his new referee that they will all forget about tonight. Kaji's surprised, knowing that Usogi is actually actually incredibly weak, wondering if it's all been a ploy and he's actually as strong as a referee. The referee responds with 90, saying he does intend to acquire the number 0. Usogi asks about his career, and we learn that referees have different natures. Some, like Yako, personally handle the use of force, and some, like Noah, use their henchmen to do the work without fighting themselves. Usogi smiles, sending a message to Kushinada. He knows that this man is number 90, and although he pretends to be the forceful type of referee like Yako, his claim at number 0 is all talk. At that moment, Kushinada is already being manipulated by Usogi. Usogi apparently requested Yako in order to attain him, but since he was already busy, this man appeared. This is why Usogi requests for everyone to forget what had happened, taunting Kushinada that he's not strong enough to become his exclusive referee. Usogi, cracking his knuckles, says that he wants to test Kushinada's strength. Kushinada responds by smashing the poker table into pieces, telling Usogi to not joke around. "Let's begin," Usogi demands. Kushinada is excited, saying the title of referee who killed Usogi has a nice ring. Usogi approaches him unbothered, pulling out a move parallel with Reigen's salt throw from Mob Psycho. But a shadow appears behind Kushinada, and he's suddenly launched into the wall with a kick. The drapes on the open window nearby flap, and we see Kiara. He appeared, took out Kushinada from the shadows, and then escaped out the window. Kiara, still in pain from the bullet he took when he battled Leo, realizes he's gonna be busy doing Usogi's dirty work, telling himself that Usogi is too rough with handling his allies. Back in the room, Kaji claims the battle seemed unnatural, but says a stronger referee is likely needed for Usogi's goal. Usogi claims that Kushinada was skilled, but he needs someone of an even higher caliber, who wouldn't have been caught in this trick with Kiara. Kaji asks about the mystery surrounding surpassing the leader, inquiring about the rules other than the number 0 referee. Usogi points to him, declaring that surpassing the leader requires one to bet everything, and you can only gamble on it once. So, in his stead, the challenger will instead be Kaji. Kaji scratches his head, claiming it's impossible for him to win, but Usogi claims Kaji will simply be the face of the gamble, and he can make the moves for him. He admits there's no plan yet, but first and foremost, they need to acquire funding. Kaji asks how much he bet the first time, but Usogi doesn't remember, quietly adding it was tens of billions. Kaji assumes he must be joking, but Usogi explains that to obtain the power over all of Kakuro, it's a laughable sum. But, Usogi adds, there's one other way to participate. By having enough power to rival all of Kakuro, you can take the entirety of it by force, completely bypassing the game of surpassing the leader. As he says this, we see a mysterious man arriving at a warehouse. He's stopped by Kakuro members, who request a body check. He agrees, and we get a better look at the man's face, with strange, striped ears. He claims that the Kakuro members may also be armed, but they say they aren't, and grant him permission to do a body check of them to be sure. "I'm not interested in groping the bodies of monkeys like you," he snaps back. "I'll kill you." He then bursts into laughter, saying it's simply a joke. He notices that the 3 Kakuro agents inside and the 2 here make 5, matching the numbers on both sides. As he undergoes a body check, he claims that if he's not interested in groping them, he's against being groped even more. Suddenly, the 2 Kakuro agents outside collapse, and the man claims he's going in. The shutter raises, and inside a woman twirls her hair, claiming she's been waiting. We're then introduced to Mizue Yuko, Kakuro's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Behind her are 2 men, one of which is Chris Lee, still injured from his fight with Marco during the poker game. The strange-eared man then reveals that his name is Craig, and when asked about the 2 Kakuro agents outside, he explains that there was a problem out there. He's also a fucking weirdo, groping Mizue, claiming he has the right to body check her now. The 2 men behind her claim they also need to have body checks if so, and Craig snaps again, calling them monkeys. Mizue suggests that they get started, and we learn that Craig is actually part of the organization that was short-selling the stocks connected to the missile launch. Craig is here to remedy their loss in the stocks, looking for 30 billion yen, or 24 of the 48 Kakuro memberships. Craig offers her one chance to remedy this by handing over one of the 2. Mizue informs him that there are no vacancies, so they can't hand memberships over. As for the 30 billion, she claims her superiors have a good answer for that. "We don't have a single cent for vulgar, block-headed white pigs that can't do anything but collect money," she says. In other words, Craig must leave.